They don't manufacture, they do the other thing. Recycling.
They recycle.
Yes.
They do the other thing. Okay, I was at a loss for words there.
Battery recycling facility there. And so we'll be speaking to one person who has been on the forefront of this fight by the residents. And then also we will talk to a virologist. What's killing Kenyans with coronavirus? We are seeing very many of the comorbidities, more than 30% being somebody who has both hypertension and diabetes, and then another serious percentages of people with diabetes and hypertension and lung diseases. So what's happening there? Also, what else do we need to learn about this? So we'll be speaking to virologist Dr. Moses Masika. And then at 9 o'clock, we'll speak to somebody who has been there and come out and thanked God. And continues to thank God about it. This is the provost of the All Saints Cathedral, and he'll be here to tell us his experience. Remember, this is the All Saints Cathedral has already said, we are not reopening. Yes, churches were to reopen, but the All Saints Cathedral leadership has said, we are not going to reopen. We do not want to subject our congregants to risk of contracting COVID-19. The provost will be here to speak to us, share his experience and share his thoughts on the fight against COVID-19. But fellow Kenyans, yesterday fellow Kenyans himself spoke. What did he say, fellow Kenyans?
Well, he said, first of all, if you don't behave yourselves, fellow Kenyans, the chances of lockdown are imminent. Okay? With the new number of 421 cases in the country, about less than the day before, however, still quite high by these standards, it pushes Kenya over to 11,673 cases with 8 new deaths yesterday. And CS Mutahi Kagwe said, look, guys, if we don't, the chances of lockdown have not been totally removed. The possibility is still quite high that we could go into lockdown if, habits are not changed. I think that was the word he used. Change your habits.
Change your habits.
Yes.
Or else. Also coming up with a couple of cautions, like if you go to a mama mboga and she's selling you mashugwa
without a mask,
and she does not have a mask,
don't buy.
Usikule hiyo mashugwa. And then people focused on the orange.
Yes.
Why orange?
Why not banana?
He actually started with vegetables.
Yes.
Why not banana?
No, he started with vegetables and then moved
To mashungwa.
to the orange, yes.
So people, why?
What thoughts went through my mind was, but the vegetables are not eaten raw. They will be cooked. But the message, I think, was to understand the dangers.
Yep.
Yes.
It's she's handling it and you're coming to handle it, and
Yes.
between the moment you buy and the moment you get home, you're likely to touch your face.
Oh, very, very, very likely.
Yep.
Very.
So there you go. You'll end up basically you stand the risk of contracting COVID-19. So
It's under very high risk.
The numbers around the world, we're looking very close at 14 million now, and it's likely that we'll tip over that number by the weekend. 13,946,637 with 592,677 deaths. A little over half of those numbers that we see have recovered. So 8,277,741 cases are recovered cases. The rest still critical or having resulted in death. The United States, again, still right there, and with 3,695,025 cases, and then very close to 150,000 deaths, standing at 141,118. Brazil, again, the numbers are quite high here, 2,014,738. And India also has crossed the 1 million case mark at 1,005,637 cases, still with the caseload for death still quite low in comparison to what is being realized as positive cases every day. So India is now third in the world. South Africa now has jumped. Yesterday, South Africa was in 9th. Today, South Africa is in 6th. 324,221 cases with 4,669 deaths. Yesterday, we saw that South Africa had 311,000 cases. So between yesterday and today, South Africa has increased by 13,000 cases. Mexico still pretty high up there, and we see that those numbers being taken into consideration of 6,406 cases between yesterday and today, and about 10%, a little bit over 10% of those cases resulting in death. So again, they're grappling with a really tough situation, trying to bring it under control. But we see again, they are also running after the virus as opposed to having contained its spread. All right, so this is what we're looking at. We also know that we heard of the death of Cindy Mandela a couple of days ago, and it has been said that she posthumously was then found to have been positive for COVID-19. So quite a number of people in South Africa are being affected by this and having died from complications of COVID.
You know, the deaths in South Africa are quite high, coming close to 5,000 now, 4,600 and something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are many people. Those are many people.
You know, when you consider that one is many.
Yeah.
5,000.
Yeah.
5,000 people. And you're talking about 5,000 people in the last, 6 months or 5 months?
Oh, I mean, we're talking about South Africa, the highest number of deaths in South Africa until the last week of June was at 1,325. Number etched in my brain. This additional number of deaths
Is after
the last week of June.
You know, I'm sure you're going to go to the international scene. Brazil is at 2 million.
Yes, Brazil is at 2,014,738 now, and has tipped over.
And yet, there is talk of opening up the economy.
In Brazil.
But there's also talk by the citizens, as is reported, they blame the president squarely. They say the gentleman pussyfooted on the issue, didn't give clear directions. Why this caught my attention was this. Here we are playing a cat and mouse game with the government, as though COVID was a game that you could play. This is a disease that will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it'll kill you quickly. The government won't die.
No,
the government will be alive. The government is an inanimate object. It will continue being there for as long as there are people in this country.
Yep.
But you, the individual who's playing this cat and mouse game, you give yourself a chance to go to eternity when you hadn't planned to go to eternity. So, it's strange, but it is true. We keep talking about government responsibility, but we must talk of government responsibility. We talk about our own individual responsibility.
there you go.
Alongside
Absolutely.
with this thing.
This is very true.
It's about individuals. It's like Mutai Kago was saying. I mean, it's all about you, man. Yeah.
Decide.
Everything else. By the time you're contracting COVID-19, it's because you came into contact with the disease and
Yes.
you know how to avoid that. So everything else now you talk about, the government does not have PPEs in the hospitals. We start focusing on other things.
Yes, they don't have, but what are you doing?
What are you doing? Doctors are not being given PPEs. These tests are expensive.
Yes, true. But what are you doing?
What are you doing about it? That's a question. And until we get to a point where we start internalizing this and saying that you've got to take personal responsibility. By the time somebody is going to hospital and they're unwell, it does not matter what the government has done or not done.
Actually, if you focus on trying to ensure that you never end up in that position where you're having this discussion of this not being there, the possibility exists and it rests with you. You decide.
You, the person.
Yep.
You, the person. Okay. It's quite something. China is still getting a few cases, right?
Yeah, China has a few cases here and there. Still right around 10 right now. Yesterday, a couple of days ago, they were up some, about 52 cases. So this has dropped in terms of what they're finding per day. Understanding also that the measures are still quite tight in terms of what they're doing. So, I mean, nowhere near where they were before, but still, having not crossed 84,000 just yet. And it's likely that this is a number that's going to be stable for them for now.
And they have conducted 90 million tests.
Can you believe it? Yep, they have the highest in the
okay.
world.
How many have we conducted?
Just under 250,000.
Okay, we're moving. We're moving. Under 250.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're moving.
We're moving.
No, we're moving.
There's movement.
Yes, that is, of course, if being stationary can be considered movement.
What's the case in New Zealand?
All right, so let's look specifically at New Zealand, which now has 1,549 cases. One new case yesterday. Having conducted 438,720 tests. We must understand that they have a population of 5 million people.
Yeah.
So about a tenth of the population has been tested. 1,549. So since they opened up the economy and then since they declared New Zealand COVID-free and then had to retract on that statement, they've realized another 150 positive cases, and then, reinstated the lockdown measures.
This 150 can't really have come from just those two ladies.
It's likely that those were cases that were existing and they just had not been gotten to in terms of testing.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you actually read and internalize the news about COVID, you need to be scared.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be scared about being careless.
Absolutely.
Something that all you require is to touch.
Yeah. And you can't see it.
Or you need to be in proximity.
It's not like dust where you can see the dust. Yeah? And then, I touched that surface and it was
It was dusty, yes, because you can see it.
This thing is very, very, very scary.
It's lethal.
It's quite scary. And when we see the kind of numbers that we are seeing now in the country rising and the kind of measures that are being taken by the government, we just have to basically get to a point where we say, okay, what am I doing?
Let's also do our part.
Yep, what am I doing about it? It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Thank you very much for tuning in. The live stream is up, www.spicefm.co.ke, as well as on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Spice FM KE. Shortly, we'll be taking a look at the newspaper headlines, what's big and what's catching our attention, and we'll be discussing that with you as well. It's 6:15. Let's take a look at the weather.
All right, let's just see what the skies look like this Friday morning. It's 13 degrees and mostly cloudy. Could explain why CT is feeling a bit of a chill. Highs of 22 and lows of 11 is what we're going to see today. In Njeri, it's already coming down in showers at 13 degrees. It'll continue for most parts of the day with highs of 20 and lows of 11. In Nakuru, it's cloudy at 13 degrees. Showers expected later with highs of 21 and lows of 13. At 12 degrees and clear skies in Eldoret, at least for this morning. Thunderstorms expected later with highs of 18 and lows of 12. Kisumu at 19 degrees. Mostly cloudy conditions. We'll see highs of 25 and lows of 19. It's cloudy in Kakamega at 16 degrees. Showers expected for later. Highs of 22 and lows of 16. 24 degrees in Malindi this morning, and it's mostly cloudy. It'll open the skies to some rain later with highs of 27 and lows of 24. Mombasa is partly cloudy at 23 degrees. We'll see highs of 28 and lows of 23. Stepping out then of Kenya into Kampala, 19 degrees, and thunderstorms forecasted for later with highs of 23 and lows of 19. It's 22 degrees in Dar es Salaam and clear skies this morning. Sunny conditions for most parts of the day, with highs of 29 and lows of 20. It's 3 degrees in Johannesburg this morning. CT, take a trip and see what it would look like if the weather was this cold here. Highs of 20 and lows of 3. Clear conditions, however. 24 degrees in Lagos and clear skies this morning. Partly cloudy conditions later with highs of 28 and lows of 23. 18 degrees in Paris and clear skies for now. Cloudy conditions will follow later quite soon. Highs of 27 and lows of 15. 19 degrees in London and partly cloudy. Highs of 27 and lows of 14. And finally, it's Thursday night in New York at 22 degrees. It's partly cloudy. It'll wake up to a morning of rain with highs of 25 and lows of 21.
This is my mic. Yes. I was
There you
on
are.
Nduh's mic. It's 20 minutes after 6 o'clock. This is the situation. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. CT, what is today's proverb?
It's a Malagasy proverb. It's not even a proverb, it's just a saying. It's a simple one and it resonates well with the rest of the world. It's the child of a rat is a rat.
The child of a rat is a rat.
Yes, period. You don't have to think hard, it's a Friday. It's fairly true.
Okay. So why did they go for rat? I mean, Swahilis went for snake.
Well, I think one.
Is it what is common in them? Is it what disturbs them? I can imagine on the coast,
Bless you.
snakes disturb the people.
The climate of the coast is
So in Madagascar, they're all rats.
No, rodents are a bit of an issue, and rats, I think, take the cup here.
Mtoto wa panya ni panya.
So I get the impression if someone calls you a rat in that country, consider it as a major insult.
Which country?
Malagasy.
Wow, it's good to laugh.
Okay. Headlines in the
Right.
papers this morning. Where do you want to start? From the very top
Okay.
or from inside, from the inner pages?
Schools turn from gold mines into graveyards of cash. COVID-19 deep-pocketed local and foreign investors count losses as multi-billion prestigious schools, branded hostels, publishing firms and bookstores post negative returns. This is carried on page 4 and 5 in the Standard today. And still, when we look at the school story, it's that, children are not in school, some teachers are not paid a salary, and that's about the size of it, right? But it's a little bit different, or rather there's more than meets the eye when you look a little bit deeper into this. And that means that so many other things suffer as a result of then, schools having been closed, children not being in school. Those, who will be hit hard include deep-pocketed local and foreign investment firms that have been that had ecstatically sunk billions into prestigious schools and branded hostels that were turning into the new gold mines. Also to be affected are publishers and stores which depend on the sales of textbooks. Investors who have put their money into prestigious schools, furnishing them with some of the finest facilities and highly qualified teachers and non-teaching staff, have charged parents high fees running into millions per semester. to recoup their investments. However, with the government declaring that there will be no learning until the start of next year, most of them will just be counting losses. And that's the reality now, because there's nobody you're going to sell to. There's nobody that your branding is going to assist. There are no more millions that will be coming into these pockets. And for those who made this cash cow their livelihood, they're now at zero.
I think I like the fact that the Standard has actually opted to show us the other side. It's not just schools and students and teachers. It's others who play along that value chain. So hostels, okay? We're talking about these big branded hostels, like they're giving prominence here to Kwetu Hostels, which was built by Acorn Holdings. They borrowed 5 billion shillings to put up these hostels. But besides this, there are very many other hostels. You can imagine all the colleges, all the universities around the country, and people who put up hostels knowing that they are targeting students.
Right.
For X number of months, they have had zero income. There are people who supply vegetables and foodstuff to the schools. For X number of months, zero market. There are drivers. There are very many
private
people.
Transport.
Private transport
so many
systems.
Things.
There are very many people actually who are suffering just because of that. The Standard is saying when schools open, within 2 weeks, 30 billion shillings is pumped into the economy. Within 2 weeks. So it's basically affected very many people. And yeah.
I mean, just what you're talking about now is that every semester, if you're just looking at colleges and universities, there are at least 2 cases I've heard of recently. People who now would build new accommodation, waiting for the next term or the next semester, as it were. And then that never happened. And the bank is not listening to whether schools are opening or not. They want their money back in terms of repayment.
If we look at the education sector in terms of the human aspect of it, the students, the parents, and then we look at the investors, there's something that perhaps need to be considered, and that these are businesses. And it is truly tragic that someone's business should go the direction of these businesses. But you see, the students haven't died or left the planet.
No.
If one can find a business solution to actually ensure that you are still alive and kicking by the time the pandemic has been managed well, and people can go back to learning, okay, not perhaps as we knew it, but can go back to learning, then there are ways in which you might recoup your losses over a long period of time. But there are other businesses that came to an abrupt halt simply because of something very simple. What came to my mind today is rubber. Rubber originally, the tree that was known to have rubber was native to Brazil. And there were towns that grew very affluent because of the production of rubber.
They were called rubber towns.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had theaters, they had what? They were prosperous. All it required was for someone to steal, because that's what they did. The rubber tree, and take it to places like the Far East, start growing it. And then with the time, erecting factories that produce synthetic rubber. That was it.
Bus.
Whole towns disappeared.
I
mean, no, the towns didn't vanish, but the activities vanished and they became ghost towns. Remember, we've read in the past about towns that grew because of gold prospecting, isn't it? Ghost towns. So this isn't something that is new. What is new is that you couldn't have foreseen COVID. And you couldn't have foreseen the disastrous effects of COVID.
It was too sudden.
You couldn't have seen it.
It just comes and that's it. Tomorrow, today you have a business, tomorrow you don't have a business.
You actually don't. And today you are earning an income, the next day you're in debt.
And it's literally the next day. This is what we saw. It's literally the next day. Because if you want to imagine that the people who made these fresh supplies, for example, for schools who prepared food on a daily basis, on Sunday the 15th of March, that ceased to be, because you were going to supply on the 16th, right? Monday. It didn't happen. And it has not happened ever since.
And if you are owed, which is actually likely to be the case, because you're not paid every day, then you're still owed.
Exactly. Didn't happen.
Big issues. Other headlines. Kenya has rejected 4 nominees to the position of ICC prosecutor.
Why?
Well,
Like you.
Kenya's ambassador to the Netherlands, Lawrence Lenayapa, has written to the court saying the selection process was biased and doctored to favor certain applicant.
Okay.
The candidates nominated for the position are Maurice Anya from Nigeria, Fergal Gaynor from Ireland, Uganda's Susan Okalani, and Richard Roy from Canada. Three of the candidates handled the collapsed ICC cases against the president and his deputy. This is Anya and Okalani represented victims of 2007 post-election violence, while Mr. Gaynor represented the victims after the charges against the president were dropped. The candidates were shortlisted by a special committee to take over from outgoing ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, who succeeded Luis Moreno Ocampo. Lenayapa, however, is saying that the nominees are not qualified and may not enable the realization of the desired consensus. The Republic of Kenya anticipated that the committee would present a shortlist of qualified candidates with an equal chance of being elected as the next prosecutor. The current shortlist does not meet this expectation, and it appears skewed in favor of one particular candidate. Yep. Yep. So, it appears
like it.
basically the story here is seems to point that Mr. Richard Roy of Canada is likely to be getting this, either Roy or Gaynor. A big issue here.
Something that caught my attention. Front page, Nation, right at the bottom.
Yep.
The direction that the prosecutor, the ODPP, decided to take in the case of Omar Ali regarding the death, the really, really unfortunate passing away of this young lady. I can't pronounce that name. What is it?
Tekra.
Tekra.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Muigai. You know, I want to talk about it yesterday. Then there's this little voice that kept telling me, this case is in court. You can't really discuss it. It probably still is in court, but I don't want to discuss the case. I want to discuss Omar Ali for exactly 2 minutes. By all description, this gentleman was what you call a beach boy. It's a title that transcends age and time. And one of the things that are known about beach boys is that they are people who gain their livelihood by living with women who have more means than they do. And many of them would even, they became known at a time when we had many tourists in the country, and they would befriend older European women. Many of them even went to live in Europe. But that having been said, many of them were married and had families in Kenya.
Right.
Okay? So even as you think about it, their earnings, their livelihood, the breadbasket was always in the relationships of the people they had.
Yep.
And over time, it even became what one may even argue as a respected profession among very many young people at the coast. And it isn't as though their wives and children didn't know. They did.
Everybody knew.
Thank you, Eric. You put it well.
All you needed to do was acquire some skill and a trade.
Yes.
Speak German, speak Italian.
And if you didn't, you learnt it in due course.
Learn it.
Yes, even if you hadn't learnt something as nonsensical as the English language, but you knew a second and a third language.
Yep.
Very true. So it also begged the question at the time, why would you do away with your source of livelihood? But the matter is still before our courts.
It's been withdrawn.
It's been withdrawn.
Yes, but they have not dropped the case.
No, they said they would go for an open inquest,
Yes.
and in the event that an open inquest is held, and then there were reasons for him to then be found guilty, or
He will be
for reasons
rearrested.
to the charge, he would be rearrested and recharged.
Yes.
As a result of that,
I
but the
see.
likelihood of this happening,
I see a conclusion to that case.
yeah, me too.
This is it.
I think this one is done.
Having a public inquest in a matter like this exposes very many things that in public.
That many people would perhaps
That-
not
yeah.
really want to be made
Yeah.
public.
There are very many details that will emerge that what's the point?
It's best left as it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. 27 minutes to 7. Let's take a look at traffic and see what's happening on the roads. And then we continue looking at the newspapers. Good morning. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. The child of a rat is a rat.
So it seems there's some hallelujah on Mombasa Road this morning. It's already quite clear from where we're looking at it, and hopefully it remains that way for most of the day. But we'll take a look at that later on. No traffic whatsoever. Unfortunately, a car has rolled at the exit of KCA on Thika Road. You need to drive carefully, approach the area with caution until that is sorted out. The passengers are all right, though, and that is being attended to as we speak. It's busy on Outer Ring today, and the traffic flow is it's building up quite some, but hopefully it doesn't result in any kind of traffic for now. Again, we'll take a look at that later on. But it looks like everywhere you look for now, it's flowing quite smoothly. It may change as we move along, getting towards 7:30, probably when we'll see things clogging up just a tad. But if you're out now is the time to move along swiftly, because then you won't get stuck. If you're not yet, just pack some patience with you. Spice FMKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what you see if you get stuck anywhere. We want to keep it moving this Friday morning.
We continue looking at newspaper headlines. There's a story that has been published by the Standard for a couple of days, and we were going over it and just passing on. But today it comes to a head on what was happening. Remember the issue of the clash between former spies and bureaucrats in the fight against corruption? On one side, pitting officers from the AG's office, the DCI, and then on the other hand, we have the EACC boss, the DPP, and those are former spies, and also the police boss. So, and then we had talked about earlier the amendments contained in the miscellaneous amendment bill that were going to change some laws regarding the fight against corruption. So it's come to a head because the Attorney General has written to the leader of the majority in Parliament, and the leader of majority has then written to the Speaker of the National Assembly saying those amendments of those particular laws, this is the Criminal Procedure Code, the Evidence Act, the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, Public Officer Ethics Act, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act, the Leadership and Integrity Act, and the Bribery Act. All those, there were some amendments that were being proposed. To tighten the noose around corruption. The AG has written and said, we need to build consensus among the people in the multi-agency task force before we go ahead with these amendments. So please withdraw those proposed amendments from that bill and don't pass them.
Yeah.
It's gotten to that point.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Why? Why do you see a good point?
Let me tell you why I see a good point. This process of ensuring that we enact this new constitution will bring turns and twists that no one, at least I can't foresee. But when you have independent government institutions like the ones we're referring to, and they are in the process of trying to actually, should we say, test the limits of their powers or the powers given to that particular office, there will be collision somewhere along the line, especially if the ultimate goal is the same. See, each department is given functions, and it is, remember, we come from a background where at some point there was one institution that did all these things.
Yeah.
And it isn't that it is difficult to understand, but the change doesn't mean the change in the mindset will be there. No. What we're seeing is the difficulty of getting people to wrap their minds around this change, which is clear and obvious. So when you find the back and forth in this debate, because this, what you just read, reassures me that there'll be further debate on this particular subject.
It's adjustments.
Yes. So it's a good thing. That's why I'm calling it a good thing.
Is it also not bad because it could be an opportunity for the corrupt to actually infiltrate
this
whole conversation?
Most certainly.
So you find that during this whole debate, just because we need to win something, then the corruption, the lords of corruption will seep into this conversation and they'll sponsor some wins.
Eric, given that this is Kenya, I wouldn't put it beyond speculation to suggest that it is possible that these very individuals or groups that you speak of or allude to were behind it. Because they can see, if I know I've abrogated the law, I can see where this thing is going.
Yeah.
I would not want it to get there.
You don't want it to go there.
You wouldn't really want it to get there. You would want to find ways of mudding these waters as much as you possibly could so that you have breathing space.
Yeah.
Because if you don't interfere in that process,
It catches up.
it's your
with you.
neck.
That's it.
Yes.
It's coming straight up at you.
Yes.
So the agencies at loggerheads here are the Asset Recovery Agency, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and the Director, and the Attorney General's Office on the one hand. And then on the other side is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Financial Reporting Center, and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. All of these are members of one multi-agency team that is fighting corruption.
Okay, then.
Haya, waongee. What do you have?
Let's talk about it. Let's see. Hospitals at tipping point as cases mount. County facilities are in dire straits as the deadly coronavirus ravages the nation. This is a story according to The Nation. The fight against COVID-19 is threatening to overwhelm healthcare resources in the country as the coronavirus pandemic burrows deeper nationwide. The severity of the disease is straining resources, causing burnout amongst health workers, some of whom have also been infected. So far, more than 450 frontline workers have tested positive, while 4 have died. A nationwide assessment of how COVID-19 has impacted the healthcare system shows that most county hospitals are stretched to the limit. On Wednesday, the Council of Governors chairman, Mr. Wycliffe Oparanya, painted a gory picture of the country's health sector and called for support from the national government. From withdrawal of ambulance services due to lack of funding to lack of testing kits, the Kakamega County boss called for the speedy operationalization of the insurance package for frontline health workers that was recommended by President Uhuru Kenyatta. So if he's asking for a speedy establishment of this, it's obvious that this has not been done.
Yeah.
The money has not been released. Implementation of said things having said, then the implementation, but we always talk about it being the problem. This is what we are facing now. In a memo to all directors and heads of departments, the Senior Director of Clinical Services at KNH, Dr. Irene Nwani, said following the decision, the Mbagathi Isolation Unit would only admit confirmed cases. The unit would not handle suspected cases or screen the public. And this is directly because of the fact that they don't have enough space. So, this is what we're
the
seeing.
Mbagathi facility is an isolation facility,
With
which means it should be
120 beds only.
it should only be handling cases in isolation. That's confirmed cases.
Sure, but
When
the
did this
mistake
change?
the mistake that they made is that they would take people with, they now started taking people with symptoms and admitting them.
So as a quarantine.
Yes, they started admitting people. And then now they've backtracked on this and said, all right, we're only taking confirmed cases. We're not taking any suspected cases whatsoever. So they're not even taking people who show up and ask to be tested.
Many balls up in the air.
This is true.
You know, there's a story that has actually touched my heart.
Okay.
Yes, I am aware with the look you've given me, Nduh, you felt that, I probably didn't have a heart.
Ouch.
And if I had one, the issue of it being touched was as remote. Anyway,
As the rats.
Okay. Let's go. I can imagine where it's coming from.
yes,
It's in Nyandarua.
it's in Nyanda.
I know your heart.
Do you guys need a moment?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Big-hearted landlord who has become his tenant's keeper. This is a gentleman who has... this is truly a gentleman. He decided to forfeit his earnings from rent to allow his tenants to simply live. As I read this story, what also caught my attention, his parents was squatters in some land in Dondori, and they were kicked out. And he says he was reluctant for the interview, but in the end, he said he knows what it means to go without food. He knows. He's been a tenant. He knows what it means to have somebody knocking on your door. He says he cannot allow somebody else to go through that experience.
Nice.
Doesn't it touch the heart?
It does. It really does tug.
Because this
at
guy
Tugs
is
at
forfeiting close to 250,000 shillings every month as a result of this gesture of his. But doesn't end there. He has been at the forefront of helping rehabilitate alcoholics in that particular county. Now, you tell me about a human interest story
Now that's a lovely story.
There is hope for humanity.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's a lovely story.
yes.
And he's not doing this, it's tender women and Zako. This
No,
guy.
him,
This
he had thrown it into the sea. He had
Completely.
gone. It's
It's a standard that's catching up
We
with
are the
him.
ones,
telling
our
him-
colleagues who followed until he
Please
agreed
tell
to give
your
this.
story.
Hmm.
Please
Yes.
tell your story. But the people around there, they know.
My
You see,
friend,
that's a good thing.
You think it ends there? He even donated 20 dairy cows to orphans in Dunyu.
20 dairy cows.
2-0. 2-0.
Okay. What presidential award does this man have?
What's the highest one which only the president has?
CGH.
Okay, the next one, after that one.
Below that.
He should
Or
give
above
it.
that.
No, just below that one.
All right. The
president.
one we gave to our marathoner.
Yes, he should be given that.
Elder of the Order of the Golden Heart. This is a man that has a
Yes,
golden
he
heart.
does. He does.
I mean, we don't need to be looking at. This is it. This is how.
You know me, I often
this
wonder
award
how
should
it
be.
is.
This
All when you see the list of awardees, civil servants, and I'm thinking, but I thought this guy was supposed to be doing this work.
Yeah, that's his job.
Why are we awarding this person?
Just because he's been promoted in his office.
Yeah, but what is
He gets an
exemplary? You see,
ABH,
you see,
MBS.
this thing is supposed to be for exemplary service, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I ask, okay.
So what is
fine.
exemplary about
What
what
has
he's
this
done?
guy done that is exemplary?
They gave the Githeri guy an award. So I mean,
Okay,
come-
yeah.
Okay.
That was
Look,
exemplary.
you must understand that even our government system has some humor in it.
No, I'm saying they gave him one. So
But it's true.
This they
This
can
gentleman
do.
deserves
Absolutely.
some serious
He
check
does.
recognition.
He does. The individuals, the persons who came up with Huduma number, if you award them, I say yes, award them by all means, because
Yeah.
you can see what they have done.
You can see the impact of that.
Yes. Those young men who are making beds and benches and what have you, even though they're copying designs from other places, but they're making them. Okay? Even if they're infringing copyright rules, but they're making beds. Now, these are the people who make you proud because they're coming up with solutions which have been touted we're not capable of.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very, very good story, that one.
You see, many people who manufacture cars didn't invent cars.
Of course not.
Yes. We know who came up with the
The
internal combustion engine. We know.
You guys are.
And the tires?
Yes,
doing
we
very
know.
well
We
this
know
morning.
who
But
does.
everybody produces them. I think my point has been
Say,
made.
say one more
Okay.
thing in unison, and I'm out the door.
What is it, Nduh? Are
Surely.
you feeling jealous?
I asked you guys if you needed a
Are you
moment.
feeling left out?
Jeez.
Okay, let's say this together with you. KPA. Captain Cargo. All right?
With a K.
With a K.
And which ends in an O.
Yes.
Go away, both of you.
KP has this information portal, Captain Cargo, that is KARGO. Today, we talked about having these terminologies, all these words that we keep throwing it here, and there. What do they mean? Okay, give us some.
I'll give you one. Bill of lading. Doesn't it sound
Bill
like
of
something that
what?
should be accompanied by a spot of tea and a crumpet? Bill of lading.
You know, you've said thing. The lading thing we can follow up and figure out.
The bill.
No, means a crumpet.
The-
It isn't
What
a
is a
derogatory reference to a female person,
No, in this case, no.
but it's something edible.
It's accompaniment for tea that you can actually eat.
Chai.
What
Mandazi.
does it look like
Okay.
a mandazi or a biscuit?
The last one.
A
Right.
biscuit.
So,
Uh-huh.
a bill of lading is a document that has the terms of contract between a shipper, such as yourself, and a transportation company who does your trucking for you. It serves three main functions. It's a document of the title of the goods, or to the goods, rather, and it's a contract of carriage, and it's a receipt for the goods, all in one. So this fantastic document then basically is able to talk about who's shipping the goods, who's responsible, and then it's also that the goods have been received.
So entrepreneur City Muga
Yes.
signs a bill of lading
Signs a bill of lading.
with the shipping company.
Yes.
Right? And this gives him title to the goods in the
Exactly.
Yes, it
and it's
also-
also showing you that whoever is receiving has also received.
Actually, it goes beyond even just my own goods, even other goods that are in the ship, so that whoever the captain or the master of that particular ship is, they have a very clear idea of the cargo.
of the cargo that they're carrying.
Yes.
Just like a manifest.
Yes, I mean, if I want to import food stuff, you don't really want to put my goods next to maybe fertilizer or something that may interfere with it. So essentially, it explains to you, it gives you clear indication of what's actually happening to you.
All right.
Right.
Hey, so you don't put
that's just
food stuff next to goats in that ship.
Not wise. I mean, now with containerization, someone will tell you, yeah, but it's containerized. Yes, but sometimes many goods are put in the same container.
So a bill of lading is one of the several documents that you use, all be found on Captain Cargo. We'll go through some of those other documents today and let you know what they are called. I mean, from cargo manifest to delivery order, certificate of conformity, pickup order, pre-advice, gate pass, they're quite a number. So we'll go through those today.
Okay.
Yep.
Just for purposes of everybody else who's been calling this thing every other name. Bill of landing, bill of lading.
Spell it for us. Lading. Spell it.
Lading.
Okay.
Lading.
Bill of lading.
You want to add some harmony
You know
to
the way
it
it's
when
said, you
pronounce
could
it.
think bill of lady. You say,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
ni moja ama wawili.
kpa.co.ke/Captain KARGO.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Spice FM, Malindi.
All right, it's about 5 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. There's a story here that's quite interesting. Germany is pursuing stolen millions that have been traced to Kenya. So, according to the Assets Recovery Agency, Germany's chief public prosecutor is seeking Kenya's assistance after charging Heinz Andreas Scholler for the offenses of breach of trust and aiding and abetting the breach of trust. So here's the issue. This gentleman apparently worked for a German shipping company, and an express and logistics Munich company, and then he siphoned millions and wired them to 2 banks in Kenya. This is how he did it. So he would come up with fictitious invoices from suppliers and couriers at his place of employment, and then the company would pay those fictitious invoices to the fictitious suppliers, which translates to him make the money.
Wow.
And then start distributing the money. Then there was a woman who lived in Diani, and this woman is his wife. He wired some 16 million like this to some 2 bank accounts in Kenya in the name of this particular woman. And the money was found in those accounts. The accounts were frozen. But in total, he is accused of having defrauded the company of 300 million shillings equivalent. So the investigations, they found, all right, so he's been sending some money into some this person's bank account in the country. What's the relationship between Mr. Shola and this particular woman in Diani, Mombasa? Oh, okay, apparently they are married. All right, so let's go and ask for Kenya's support. Sought Kenya's support. The bank, the courts already froze these accounts in 2016. And then there was the same gazettement done again on October 4th, 2019, which paved the way for the forfeiture case. Now they are at the point where they want to take all that money. The woman in question never went to court to challenge any of these things.
I wonder why.
He was like, what is 16 million? Sasa nilitoka hapa. It's just like,
it's 10 bob, I go and get a check for 100 shillings. Why?
Waste so much money to go and look for only 16 million. Come on.
These are not my problems.
Yeah, these are not my problems.
Speaking of good problems, new fuel taxes to pump 6 billion shillings into state coffers in the next 30 days. The government stands to earn as much as 6.3 billion shillings in just 1 month in the wake of the recent upward review of fuel pump prices by the energy regulator. Going by the new monthly pricing guide announced by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, IPRA, the exchequer will pocket 1,419 shillings for every 33-seater minibus matatu that tanks up on diesel. The regulator in the new pricing guide announced every 14th of the month raised petrol and diesel prices by 11 and 17 shillings respectively. Motorists are as a result now parting with 100.48 shillings for a litre of petrol in Nairobi, up from last month's 89.10. This means it will now set back a motorist 6,600 shillings more to fill the tank of an ordinary car with a capacity of 50 litres of super petrol compared to last month, according to the computation in the new formula.
I'm happy that this story has come out because it's something that always, every 14th, we wonder, so
what's going to happen?
What's happening to the fuel price? This is how it is. Let's just take a look at what is costing you for super petrol, all right? When it's landing at the port of Mombasa, it's costing 31 shillings and 42 cents. Then in comes the formula, and the formula is saying it's trying to cap the amount of money that oil marketers are going to make out of this. Oil marketers are told you can only make a maximum of 12 shillings and 39 cents. And then the distribution, Kenya Pipeline, and owners of tankers are going to make 3 shillings and 11 cents out of per litre. All right?
Make.
Yes, that is how much they are allowed to make. A maximum of 3 shillings and 11 cents per litre. Maximum of 12 shillings and 39 cents per litre at the pump for oil companies and marketers. That's all their margin.
When you do the maths?
The government is making 53 shillings and 56 cents.
Per.
Remember, this thing cost 31 bob when it landed at the port.
The government is charging
The
you
government
more.
is...
Charging you more than the cost of the thing.
People said, what you do is you pay taxes to the government, and then as a bonus, the government gives you fuel. This is what's happening in this country.
Yep.
Coming to the top of the hour, it's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Today is Proverb City. And where is it from?
It's from Malagasy. The child of a rat is a rat. Now, I know it sounds perhaps a little...
Rati.
Well and obvious, but The thing about Malagasy and why rats and mice are actually a peculiarity is in this sense. Those are the only rodents that they have in that country. You have giant rats, you have not so giant rats, mice, almost microscopic mice. But the thing you need to understand, the family of rodents is actually quite large. So when you only have that one or two species represented, then of course it becomes
The
important.
only thing that you know.
Yes.
They only know rats. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
All right, so let's take a look at no traffic today. And it seems that there's no traffic on Gong Road today, no traffic on Mombasa Road, no traffic on Thika Road. So it looks really good right about now. But I take your no traffic and I raise you 30 minutes where there will be more traffic on these roads. We need to keep an eye out for that in terms of what could happen. There's fog at Kimende stretching towards Naivasha. It is Friday, so we're looking outside of the city also. So right around the Kimende stretch as you're getting there, the fog is very, very low. And even at 7 o'clock, you need to have your fog lights on if you're headed in that direction. So that's where our attention is today, outside of the city. We'll take a look at Mombasa and Kisumu in a short while. But from where we stand or sit at this point, everything looks really, really good. If you see something different, don't hesitate to let us know. Spiced FM KE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let's see what the traffic looks like in your neck of the woods this morning.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room.
This, The Situation Room, is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's in Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa, 87.9. In Malindi, 97.7. Nyeri, 90.9. Eldoret, 96.7. Nakuru, 96.0. Kisumu, 102.5. Yangon, Myanmar, www.spicefm.co.ke. And also we live stream to the world on Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. A very interesting story came out yesterday, and this is about this place in Mombasa. Where is this estate exactly? Owino Uhuru Slum.
I'm not very sure myself. Not really.
So the Owino Uhuru Slum story has been in the news for quite a while. And what happens is that there was a factory that was set up here, and the story was done on KTN a number of years back, done by John Alan Namu and Jichapevu, on what is happening to the residents of this particular area. So a factory was set up. This factory would go and collect all the old batteries, come here and smelt those batteries, and basically just recycle and get their raw, the components out of it, and see what other use those components can be put into. The problem here is that these are lead batteries. So there is seepage of the lead onto the ground. And then that goes into, of course, the water and everything. So the residents of this particular area started getting a number of complications, health complications. They did not understand what was happening. They just knew that there's this factory here. We know there's smoke, there's smell, there's whatever, but nothing much that they could do about it. Until several organizations came together and they started raising the issue on behalf and advocating on behalf of the residents. Matter went to various areas and tribunals. The National Environment Management Authority was asked, have you conducted an impact assessment on this particular issue? They said yes, they had. They were told no, you need to do it again. The case went to court yesterday. The court found that these people deserve compensation. And they were awarded 1.3 billion shillings, the residents of this particular estate, Owino Uruslam. And then the government was told you need to pay within 3 months. Chop, chop.
Let me ask the question. Someone was using lead batteries as raw material in his factory. Okay. Where does he come in this suit? Because it's the government that is being ordered to pay. Why the government?
The government should have taken care of all these things. The government, where was the government? Where are the government agencies? By the time the government is licensing this particular organization, right?
Yes.
By the time the government is allowing these operations to happen, by the time, because we have all these agencies that are environment management agencies.
NEMA.
NEMA to the
others,
like, and yeah.
Yeah, and local authorities, where are they? This issue is important because remember there's the other issue of just here in Syokimau, where residents are also up in arms because of pollution from a certain factory. And the county government of Machakos ordered the closure of this factory until they meet certain criteria. I mean, they had been ordered to do some things by NEMA again, and residents say that they still haven't met those demands. So this is an issue that comes to the fore. What is it that happens when organizations such as NEMA and the others drop the ball?
Maybe we should take this further and look at the raw sewage that has been spilled onto the lake and ask the question, who are these? Because that has even further reaching ecological consequences.
True.
Yes.
True.
I think also understanding the impact that such things would have on the environment from the very beginning is very, very important here. And we've gotten to the point where individuals are affected. Here we have residents of Owino Uhuru in Mombasa then having gotten sick first. Because the scary thing is that had they not gotten sick to the extent that they did, they would not have brought this thing forward, right?
Yep.
Same thing for these individuals in Syokimau. Had this one family not lost their son and then had another one who was so ill, and then others who continue to have respiratory issues because of this, the likelihood of it having come to the fore then was very, very low. So then we have to start asking ourselves the question that in terms of consideration of the environment, what happens then with factories and companies who are spilling out, these dangers to the environment on a regular basis in the name of commercialization? So that question needs to come out. How much regard really is there for the environment? Raw sewage is something that has become so normal for many people that they don't even see that it is something wrong. That if raw sewage, for example, is spilled onto the roads where children play, where vehicles are passing, then you bring it back into your home, and then that same water then finds its way to somebody's farm and then is essentially irrigating vegetables that people then consume later. Do you see the chain? But the regard for such actually doesn't ever come to light until somebody gets sick or somebody dies. And what we're saying, I think that we need to get to the point and get to the very beginning of this chain and say, look, there's certain standards from the very beginning that you must meet. There's certain things, it sounds crazy that you have to say it, but that you should not do. You shouldn't spill raw sewage out in the open. Such things shouldn't be. Another example, Kitengela, a few months ago, residents raised 40 million shillings for their own sewage plant. Think with disgust, what is still happening when it comes to sewage that needs to then be gotten rid of?
When you have heavy rains.
Exactly. Think to yourself what really happens. So think about regulation. Think about standards. Think about things like this. That's where the focus should be. Unfortunately, these individuals who got sick are a byproduct of the ignorance that has been applied to many of these things.
I think you are kind with your view. You're very generous, because if you have government agencies whose job is to ensure that such things don't happen, because take the discussion even further and ask, what about the exposure that people who work in such establishments have? Because if you read the story of this factory, see, the lead acid business is actually a fairly prosperous business. Its value as of 2016 was something like $4.6 billion US dollars. Okay? And this particular factory, whatever it had extracted was actually being shipped to India. Okay. Now, working in the factory put you in a great deal of danger
Right.
because you're exposed. Now, if you're exposed, the likelihood of your children also being exposed because what they offered at the time was something like 200 jobs. Okay? So imagine everyone who works here. So the question you ask is, what were these safety measures that were guaranteed when this factory was actually put in place? And this goes straight to NEMA.
Yep.
Remember, we had this case in Naivasha where, just about the most tragic thing you can ever hear of, the woman who killed 4 of her children. And my view was, we've read, we've understood. There's a department that's supposed to be handling this thing. Why are those people not being taken to court?
Yep.
I'm asking the question, why is NEMA not in court?
It is. In this particular case?
Yes.
So the organization that took the case to court is the Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action. And we'll be seeking to speak to the Executive Director, Phyllis Omido, shortly. They moved to court in 2016 on behalf of the residents and sued the Ministries of Environment,
Good.
Health,
Good.
the National Environment Management Authority,
Super.
the Export Processing Zones Authority,
Excellent.
and Penguin Paper and Book Company.
Lovely.
Now, Justice Omolo yesterday found that the state agencies and the private investor who run the factory are liable for poisoning the residents, and they're the ones to pay 1.3 billion shillings to these residents. They were seeking 1.6 billion. They were awarded 1.3 billion. And the state agencies are also now required to go and clean up any remnants of lead from that area.
Good.
Very good.
No, that is lovely.
This is it, right? This is when you feel,
No, that is delightful
Justice
stuff.
served.
But
Nice.
the thing I liked about it, Kabisa liked, 3 months to pay.
yes.
Nothing
You
like,
are
okay, we'll
supposed to-
start looking money over the next 10
no.
years. No.
COVID
no.
notwithstanding.
Yes.
Pay now.
No,
If the state does not remove any waste deposited within the settlement, they should pay 700 million shillings in default.
I like this judge.
And as now comes to, it was 1.3. So we go to 2 billion.
Because the truth of the matter is the 2 billion will not restore their lives.
People have
No,
died.
it won't. People have died. Yeah.
People have died. When they were going to court, they were actually listing and saying so-and-so died, and the causes of this are basically just directly linked to the lead
even
poisoning.
as they take NEMA to court, they should take individuals to court as well and join them in the cause because they're people who are responsible.
Individuals.
Yes, individuals must be singled out and said so-and-so was in charge of this, so-and-so was in charge of this, and join them.
There was a time, were we having a discussion with, and they said that this is what ought to happen as well.
Yes.
If you just take an organization in court, the individual who sat there, just...
Who made those
Ignored
decisions
something
on
or
behalf
appended
of...
a signature somewhere, right?
Or was bribed.
Or was bribed.
Because we know what happens in these cases. Someone
Actually,
just comes and tells you, watch a company, I'll be giving you some X amount. Right? Somebody took a bribe, somebody did not do their job, they looked the other way, and this is what happened. That person, personal culpability.
NEMA is in every part of the country, isn't it?
Yes.
So, and the people who are employed in NEMA are people who are environment experts.
Yep.
You cannot say that they don't have the capacity. And if they do, then they shouldn't be there. So, when you have a situation like this, I think until and unless individuals who are responsible for the decision making for these organizations start being charged individually,
Yep.
these things will not cease.
Yep.
They must know that when this thing comes to light, and should the matter go to court, you are culpable.
And
You
when the
can't
issue of
get-
public health comes in as well, the person in charge of public health in the
There's
area,
someone who's in charge in the area.
they know. I mean, you can see people complaining. You're
know
supposed
that a
to
certain-
actually be going
People keep
around.
coming to hospital
People
all
keep
the time.
coming to hospital with a certain kind of ailment or with certain symptoms. You're duty bound to start asking questions. The same way somebody appears in the hospital with a gunshot wound, you're duty bound to then report to the security agency and say, such and such has happened. By the time 1, 2, 3 people are appearing with the same symptom, you know that the cause of this is because you ask questions
Yep.
to be able to determine the reason why they have come in with this illness. What area do you live in? What are you exposed to? 1, 2, 3. You start to see a trend, then you must take it further and start to ask questions. So I do agree. That person must be held culpable as well. It must be. It must be. And I say it's we've been ignoring some of these things for too long because it's been put on the back burner. Like, environment's not so much of an issue. It's an issue.
It's an
It's
issue.
a major one.
Man, that's where you live.
Remember when the nation carried a series of stories about
On
poison
water
rivers,
sources, right?
Oh, if they did.
And what was it showing? It was showing the same kind of things.
It was.
Yeah. So NEMA and the other agencies would come up and say, we try, but we get...
Your job is not to try, your job is to solve and to solve the problem.
Yep.
But if you're going to have this discussion, then let's go right up to the minister.
Bus. 14 minutes after 7, let's take a look at weather and then come back and continue this conversation. Shortly, we'll be speaking also to the body that took this case to court on behalf of the residents of Okoh.
Temperatures dropping in Nairobi now at 12 degrees. Mostly cloudy conditions for most parts of the morning. Highs of 22 and lows of 11. Light rain showers being experienced in Njeri at this point of the morning. Likely to graduate into heavier rains. Highs of 20 and lows of 12. Nakuru at 14 degrees is mostly cloudy. We'll see highs of 21 and lows of 13 with showers in the afternoon. It's clear in Eldoret at 12 degrees. It'll change later though to thunderstorms with highs of 18 and lows of 12. 25 degrees will be the high in a very cloudy Kisumu today with lows then of 19. Kakamega will experience showers in the afternoon at highs of 22 and lows of 16. Taking a look into Malindi, where at 24 degrees it's mostly cloudy. We'll see highs of 27 and lows of 24 with showers in the afternoon. It'll be a cloudy afternoon in Mombasa with highs of 28 and lows of 23. Currently partly cloudy conditions. 19 degrees in Kampala and expecting showers later with highs of 23 and lows of 19. Taking a look then into Dar es Salaam, where it's partly cloudy at 21 degrees. We'll see highs of 29 and lows of 20. And in Joburg is warming up slightly, ever so, 4 degrees. Highs of 20 and lows of 2 today with sunny conditions for most parts of this Friday. And we'll take a look lastly for now in Lagos at 24 degrees. Clear skies currently, but that will change later to highs of 28 and lows of 23 and a very wet afternoon well into the weekend.
The Situation Room is continuing with this conversation. It's now 19 minutes after 7 o'clock. We are looking at this story, which is a big win in the war against pollution of the environment. State ordered to pay 1.3 billion shillings to Nduh Okoh lead poisoning victims. Residents moved to court in 2016 seeking 1.6 billion as compensation for the deaths of their loved ones. Justice Omolo found the state agencies and the private investor who ran the factory liable for poisoning the residents. The state is also to remove any waste deposited within the settlement or pay a further 700 million shillings in default. This is a good case. The Nduh Okoh slums in Changamwe, Mombasa County. The people were affected by lead poisoning, which emanated from a factory within the area. In a ruling yesterday, Justice Anomolo also ordered state agencies responsible for the environment to clean up any remaining deposits. And this is a case that had been taken to court on behalf of the residents by the Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action. It had also been covered widely in the local and international media on what was happening in the state, the state of the people in this particular estate, what was happening to them, why NEMA, why the Ministry of Health, why the Ministry of Environment, why the factory itself, the investors in this factory were not heeding to, the cries of the residents when they were saying, look, there's something that's killing us here. We are getting affected by what we are seeing, and it's really not working for us. And what was happening? They were getting no reprieve.
I shudder to think, even as we wait to get more details about this, I shudder to think then what would be the plight of many, because I can tell you now, without any avoidance of doubt, that there are very, very many other areas in this country where other residents are suffering from something just like this because of either, waste being gotten rid of in their areas of residence. They're suffering from some medical ailments that they can't really explain. They may have been to hospital and there's not any kind of adequate treatment that has been given to them, and then it can be pointed back to the environment. And there's somebody then with some kind of financial muscle that basically is throttling any voices or muffling any voices that would come up in dissent to ask that something be done about this. It shines a light on the possibility of so many other cases like this happening, but they've not been brought to the fore because they don't have muscle to be able to bring that out. And the environment whereby it should be providing a safe haven for so many people actually turns out to be that the environment then is attacking you because of one individual's input or one company's input.
You know what makes it even more bizarre is that we actually have a constitution that very adequately looks after the interest of the Mwananchi.
Right.
But the application of it clearly doesn't. Or the selected application of it doesn't. And this is why the individuals who are charged with the duty of ensuring that these things are done, they must be held culpable. They cannot go scot-free. You cannot talk about an agency. An agency is run by individuals. And those individuals must be brought to book. Each and every one of them, to the person who is supposed to go out and deliver that information to everyone, right up to the top, right up to the minister. Because honestly speaking, you earn a salary to ensure that you perform these duties, and you don't. If you just didn't, then we'd say, okay, but at the detriment of the lives of the citizens whose lives you're supposed to look after. No.
I know that if we were to call on right now the CS Ministry for Environment, which is Mr. Tobiko, it would probably be said that, well, these things began to happen when he was not in office, this, that, the other thing. But it actually doesn't matter, because these things, regardless, still fall under your docket. And there should be, at the very least, there should be a bird's eye view of what is going on around the country. Because guess what? That's your docket. It's not particular pockets.
If the enthusiasm that's being shown with Ngong Forest
to remove the residents who are
well, to set certain things right, because that's what the department,
the bottom line of this story is to set things right.
Exactly. Certain decisions were made which one shouldn't have been made. Let's set things right. If that same diligence was followed with this,
or cases like these.
Yes.
Because you can't tell me that it hasn't gotten to their whiff that there are other cases
they know.
Like this.
Of course they do.
And people are... This is the thing that miffs me.
This is their docket.
This is the thing that really miffs me.
How can they not know?
is that people, it's not like people get sick and they have a sniffle for some time and then it's over. People die.
In reality, you actually can't build a hut without NEMA say so.
Right. So they give approvals. They set the standard.
Man, they do.
They set the standard. They give the approval or they deny that you can't go ahead. So when these things are happening, is it that there's a wool over their eyes?
No.
Or that they choose to turn a blind eye?
Once again,
or
you're being kind.
Or that, the money too sweet, as we talk, as in...
Put it simply, these are not people who were ignorant. These were people who probably got paid.
Right.
Father Doolan, who was in this studio a while back, 5 years ago, really harped on this matter. And he talked about it and talked about it and talked about it.
Yep.
I am happy that it was picked up.
Yep. This particular lady who took the case to court, Phyllis Omido, also was working in this particular area. So she had moved there, she was working there, and she started noticing that her own child was falling sick.
Oh dear.
And what was happening to the neighborhood? The neighborhood children would get convulsions and they go to the local hospitals. And, the medics there would try dealing with anything from malaria to everything else, dysentery and all. And the conditions are not improving until they go to a point where they tested positive for lead poisoning. And this is when now it emerged. This is what's happening. So where would lead be coming from? Traced it back to factory. Issues about the factory were discussed. And this is when the case was taken to court by Phyllis Omido and the rest, because they had tried all ways to discuss with this particular company.
They weren't listening.
Discuss with the authorities that are concerned.
They weren't listening.
Nothing. Not getting any feedback. And then what happens? You actually have to take it to court. And it's commendable that a case has taken 4 years to conclude.
No, it's delightful actually.
And to this particular case where it's very clear that somebody dropped the ball and the judge is saying, all of you, from the person who authorized, from the person who should have checked public health, from the person who should also have kept checking, that is NEMA, from the person who authorized these people to operate from this particular facility, all of you liable.
But meanwhile, let the government pay.
Yep. Everybody needs to pay.
I mean, in the way you are right about this, you see, as you think about it, how many other Kenyans suffer silently from this because they're disadvantaged, and the people who should speak on their... now this brings to my mind, what on earth do these members of parliament and MCAs do?
The local, right?
Well, you're a representative, really.
Of that area.
Yes.
You come and start shouting in Nairobi. That's not your job. No.
Do you know, or in the headquarters of that particular county? Because such a matter could not have gone without getting to where it was, without the MCA knowing or hearing about it. It's not possible.
In those days, the councillor
No.
and the local authorities, they must have known. Let's speak to Phyllis Omido, who's now joining us. She's the Executive Director of Justice, Governance and Environmental Action, Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action. Good morning, Phyllis.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. We're going to just do an introduction and then take a look at traffic and then come and have a proper conversation on this. This is a landmark ruling that you got yesterday.
Yes, it is. It's a landmark ruling for the community, but also for Kenya and all of us who are pushing for environmental justice within the country.
The case has been in court since 2016. Just take us through briefly, when did you decide to take this case to court? What is it that you had seen?
All right. We knew that we wanted to go to court early since 2008 when we started. But unfortunately, in the old constitution, there were no provisions that were as good as the ones that we have now in the new constitution for environmental justice in Kenya. And therefore, because of that, we could not get justice during the old constitution. Remember, we started this movement in 2008. We actually went to court in 2016, several years after we started fighting. So for me, it's one of the good things that we have from the new constitution, and that's why we have to defend the new constitution.
That's a very good thing. Let's take a quick break and then come and have a proper conversation into this. Tell us the plight of the people of Owino Uhuru, what is happening to them, what's the impact of this, what kind of conversations had you had with the investors there of this factory, with the local authorities, with the agencies responsible for environmental management, with the ministries, with government. We'd like to know the story, the whole background story of this particular case, as how we got to this 1.3 billion shillings award. We are speaking with Phyllis Omido. She's an environmental activist. She's one of those who took this case to court and got a good win for the people of Owino Uhuru slums in Mombasa. Good morning. 29 minutes after 7. Take a look at traffic and then continue this conversation.
All right, on Wayaki Way, getting into Westlands and then joining the roundabout there. It looks like a bit of a hold up and hopefully will not last too long. The bypass at the Red Hill is still open and that can be used for now. Ngong Road, there seems to be a bit of a problem because there was an accident there and nobody wants to approach a body that's in the middle of the road right now. So guys, you need to be careful as you get into that area. And I know that emergency services have been called. No incidents or accidents apart from that right now. Mombasa Road, though, is building up just as we had expected around this time. Hopefully that will be sorted out soon enough. But the traffic that we would expect on a Friday morning is just not that crazy today. So it's great. However, looking at the outskirts of the Nairobi metropolitan area, specifically going towards Limuru, the fog is still very low, even for 7:30. And so we're asking that as you're going out in that direction, that you be very careful and use your fog lights where you can, because visibility is poor. All right, apart from that, it looks pretty good. Spice FM KE, that's how you can get in touch in case you see something that we should know about, so we can share that information this Friday morning.
27 minutes to 8 o'clock. The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, continues. We are speaking with the Executive Director of the Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action, Phyllis Omido. She took the case to court with her organization on behalf of the residents of Owino Uhuru slums in Changamwe. I have to say Owino Uhuru slums in Changamwe, Mombasa.
Brother, you've been assimilated.
Owino Uhuru. They have won 1.3 billion shillings out of this. Phyllis, before we went to the break, we wanted you to come back and tell us the background to this story.
All right. So, in 2009, we started a movement that was aimed at shutting down Little Refinery PZ. This is because I had gotten this job at the refinery, and 3 months down the line, my son tested positive for lead poisoning. I went into Uhuru and tested 3 other children randomly, and all the 3 children tested positive for lead poisoning. At that time, I was still very naive, I believe, because I trusted that government would act if I told them the story of my child and these other children. So I distributed letters to the EPZ authority. I went to the ministry, public health. I spoke to the doctors that were attached to the municipal council at that time, and I gave them the results, my son's results. I went to NEMA as well, and several other state agencies. And at that time, what I was telling them is we needed this smelter moved from the location from Uhuru. It was a very tough thing and a wake-up call for me, and I realized after pushing for almost a year that nothing was going to be done by government because the smelter was protected by some very powerful individuals within Mombasa. In 2011, 2010, I started organizing the community for demonstrations. And anytime we demonstrated, what they would do is that they would close the factory for some time, maybe 2-3 days, and tell us, oh, we are working on compliance. And then shortly after, they would reopen the factory. In 2012, I decided to do a mega demo. No, in 2011, a mega demo that blocked Nairobi-Mombasa highway. I was arrested during that. Before even the demo began, I was arrested and taken to Changamwe police station. The next morning, I was charged in court with inciting violence, people gathering. So I had to stand trial for a whole year. And within this year, I could not do anything. So the pollution became very, very worse than it was before. This is when we started seeing people actually convulsing in the community and dying. Several women had miscarriages. We saw women losing their wombs from miscarrying several times. And so the situation became worse during the time 2012, especially when we were in court, because we feared that any action would be viewed as contempt of court, and it would make things worse for us. Remember, the witnesses against us were mostly state agents and state agencies and police, and therefore chances of us being in prison were very high. So for the whole year, we were fighting to get ourselves free in 2012, and during this year, things became really bad for the Uhuru community. We were acquitted in November in 2012, and the same month, I organized another demo, a mega demo in Uhuru, and we continued doing demonstrations, and it became cut and game with NEMA, the Ministry of Public Health, and all the other ministries. For several years, they would shut down Metro Refinery for a bit, then they would reopen again. In 2015, I won the Goldman Environmental Prize, and at that time we knew that we wanted to go. We didn't have the finance. We knew we wanted to go to court. We didn't have the finance to go to court, and we knew it was a very expensive affair. So immediately after the Goldman Prize, when I came back to Kenya, I set up a team of lawyers, and we started going through our documents to ensure that we had as much evidence as we did. We realized we didn't have enough evidence, so I did a petition to Senate, to Parliament, asking both of them to do their own investigations into the case. The Senate Committee on Health was sent to Nduh, and a task force was set up, and they called it the Nduh Task Force, a task force of experts across different state agencies. And they came first to Center for Justice. I ran them through what we had gathered so far.
Yeah.
At this time, we had tests that we had done on the soil, the air, on the vegetation. We had so many tests that we had already done, enough to prove that something was really wrong in the community. So the task force listened to us, and we went together to the community, and they commissioned their own tests. The SGS and Cambry also came on board, and they did a prevalence study that concretely quantified the contribution of the lead smelter, the myriad of environmental and health hazards that were happening in the community. Wow. So we wanted to create a link between the smelter and what was happening in the community. So this prevalence done by
Cambry and SGS.
Concretely quantified the contribution of the smelter to the health and environmental hazards in Nduh. So after that, the Senate released their reports. After the task force handed in their reports, Parliament also shortly after did their own study, tested. I believe Senate tested 50 people, and Parliament also tested 100 people in the community. So we had enough. You
had a war chest. Basically, you were ready. You had enough material to take to court.
Yes, we had enough material by end of 2015, and January 2016, I filed the case in court. And so this started our journey in court. It has been a long journey. It has been a costly journey, but it's all been worth it. To see today when justice has been served. I know to the Nduh community, they are happy, but I know it might not feel like justice because it took too long. Too many people died. Too many people lost their lives.
How many people have died from your records?
So far, we have lost 30 children, a little bit more than 30 children, and about 20 adults that we have documented so far.
And this is within a period of how long?
This is since the smelter started up to 2014. Realized that we were unable to shut down Metal Refinery from the beginning up to 2014 when we shut down Metal Refinery. And Metal Refinery was not shut down because Parliament took a stand for the people or because Senate took a stand for the people. No. When we realized that nothing was happening within our country, we were unable to move because there were political powers that were supporting this smelter. We went to the community. Through the East African community, we passed a legislation that banned the export of lead and lead alloys from East Africa.
Right.
And then the port now to start impounding containers that left Metal Refinery. We would trace these containers, their number plates, and then we would inform the port. So they started impounding these containers and taking them to port. So basically,
other action that basically just led to the closure of this particular factory.
Yes. So it became too expensive for them to operate. And this is what led actually to the closure of Metal Refinery finally in 2014.
Can I ask you, just take a few steps before you went to court. I want to assume that there was some kind of communication then between yourselves, even as residents of this area, and the company that was involved in the smelting. What was their response, their initial response?
All right. They were very arrogant and they talked to us the way all the other people who pollute Kenya speak. They said that they had the licenses.
Yeah.
They had complied with the laws in Kenya, and therefore they don't understand what we were making noise about. And remember, we have letters from NEMA writing to us, telling us that what we are telling them is hearsay and there's no pollution in Uhuru.
So NEMA basically would write back to you and tell you that what you're claiming is not possible. It's not happening.
Yeah, it's not possible, and that they were ready to defend it in any court of law. Okay, at that time...
Did they know people died? Did they know that people were ill and that people were at risk of death? Were they aware of this?
I documented and I ensured I circulated the information in all the government departments, from the first person who died, called Carissa, up to the last person who died in the community. I would document this and make sure that I shared it with all the state agencies involved. That is NEMA, Public Health, the authority. I kept sending the letters. I kept it consistent.
Yeah.
And these letters are one of the things that has also helped us in court. Yeah.
It's a long journey. I mean, these are very many years. We're just looking at it from 2016, and we are forgetting that
2008.
Those are 8 years prior that you had been going the back and forth, even getting charged yourselves and going through the court process yourselves, when you're accused of inciting people to violence, just because some organizations that are supposed to be doing some work are not doing their work. And so when Parliament was conducting its investigations, the National Assembly and the Senate, and they came up with their reports, what was the recommendation of their report?
So they had several recommendations. The Senate especially had very good recommendations. The first one was that the NEMA and other state agencies should clean up a process called remediation. They should remediate, this is the removal of lead elements from the soil, from the water, from the general environment, from the houses of the people. So Senate asked them to do this. They asked them to test all the community members and provide medicine. They asked the Ministry of Health to provide medication for the community. But one thing also Senate did is they asked us to go to court because of Article 42, Article 59 and 70 of the Kenyan Constitution. Yep. They asked us to present the case to court in order to get compensation. They didn't have the power to order any form of compensation for the community, but they directed the relevant state agencies to clean up the soil, the water, environment, and also treat the people of Uhuru. Parliament also came up with a very good report. They also agreed that there was lead. They had found very high levels of lead in the community. They also came up with their own raft of recommendations, none of which was ever implemented at all for the community.
It's unfortunate. We are speaking with Phyllis Omido. She is the Executive Director of the Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action. They took a case to court on behalf of the residents of Owino Uhuru Slum in Changamwe, Mombasa. The court has agreed with their case and awarded the people 1.3 billion shillings that should be paid by government agencies and the company that was accused of leading to this lead poisoning. This is a big win, and that's what we're discussing. Taking a quick break in this particular conversation. Phyllis, just stay on the line so we come back and we continue this conversation. In the meantime, let's go back to still in the coast and to the port this time, and go to the portal at the port.
Right. So at the portal at the port, we're looking at some of the terminologies that you would hear, some of the terminologies that you will find on the portal that perhaps you wouldn't really understand what they meant. And we're looking specifically at documentation, and we talked about the bill of lading. Let's look at a cargo manifest that we hear all the time. It's a shipping document used for accounting and transportation of cargo goods from one port to another or others during a specific voyage. So it's basically everything that's happening for your cargo details are lodged on this particular document, which is called a manifest. So in terms of accounting, in terms of transportation, what's going to log your cargo on, what's going to take it off, how much you've paid, and the relevant authorities that have received or sent these payments. Another thing that you're going to see quite often on the Captain Cargo portal is a delivery order. And that's a document that is issued by the carrier at destination port to make sure that the cargo is released to the receiver as agreed upon in the bill of lading. In the bill of lading, now you get your delivery order. It's basically saying this is another document that you get that shows that all of those things are going to be actually.
12 minutes to 8 o'clock. The Situation Room. In the room is Eric Latiff, Nduh Okoh, CT Muga, and on the line is Phyllis Omido. She is the Executive Director of the Center for Justice, Governance and Environmental Action. Took the case on behalf of the residents of Owino Uhuru Slum in Changamwe, Mombasa, because of lead poisoning. 30 children died. 20 adults died, and this is until 2014. The data that they had until 2014. These are many people to die, and the causes can be traced back directly to one particular factory. And government agencies were basically just sitting there doing nothing.
What I wanted to ask you, Phyllis, is what was the cost of this entire process?
Our spreadsheets in the office, I'm looking at them yesterday. It's more than 20 million that we have spent since we started, both on the studies, on the litigation, putting together the legal team. You know, we wanted to get the best minds in Kenya, and so we chose a law firm that was located actually in Kisumu, because they are to us, when we met them and spoke to them, they seemed like they were grounded, and they had knowledge of environmental justice. So remember, our lawyers, our legal team was coming all the way from Kisumu every time that we were going to court. We had to mobilize the whole community every time to be in court. So it was a very costly affair. We had to document, we had to get people in court, media and all those people documenting the case as it continued. Because we believe, even for future generations, this case is really landmark for Kenya.
What is it that influenced your determination?
Pardon?
What made you so determined?
When I started, I believe I was just very angry at the situation. I could not believe that such a situation would go unattended by all the state agencies in Kenya. But I continued, the toll that I saw it having on the people of Uhuru solidified my resolve that I would see this through. Until the day that I was arraigned in court, I denied the fact that I was an activist. I kept saying, no, I just want people to act on this issue. I'm not really an activist. But the day I was charged in court, when I slept in the cells, and in the morning I was walking out, the whole community had slept outside Sangamo police station. And as I was being driven away in the police, the community started walking after me, because they didn't even have fare to come to court. So that is the time that I stood in court, and I knew that I had become an activist. And after that, I knew that I had resolved to sue the day that justice comes for the community. There are people in the community that are still living with the lead poisoning. Remember, WHO defines lead poisoning as 10 micrograms per deciliter of lead. You know, with the people who have up to 420 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood. Like, you cannot even know, it's more than 400 times
Yeah,
what
that is
lead
high.
poisoning is supposed to be. We have the lady who had the highest level, her thyroid has given in. She lives a miserable life day because of exposure to lead. So for me, the suffering that I saw the community going through, the mothers that lost their lives at childbirth, the children that were born who tested positive from day one, tested positive for lead poisoning, this solidified my resolve to continue with the fight.
Phyllis, it just appears, I mean, it's evident that there may be many, many more cases like this around the country, not necessarily with lead poisoning, but could be that there are other things like this going on. And there could be another Phyllis somewhere who's thinking that, I want to be able to do this, but I have these monsters that I'm facing. Could be the organization. I don't even know where to start. Obviously, there was a resilience that you had. And where do people start from? Where should they? Where does the strength even come from to begin with something like this? Because it may seem like, yes, and I'm not going to be a dampener on what happened yesterday, but just like you've said now, there are people who, even though this ruling was given in the manner in which it was, they are going to continue suffering. They are still sick. They will live with this for a very long time. God forbid that anybody else dies as a result of this. But around the country, any other cases that are being seen like this, what would you say that people need to do to take the first step to begin to fight some of these things?
I believe many activists are coming up, environmental activists. Actually, at Center for Justice, we have a mentorship program. We have brought together so many activists, environmental activists from around the country, and we are mentoring them and sharing our experiences with them so that then they are able to replicate this across the country. When we started this fight, actually, NEMA went around the country and we counted a total of 17 smelters that NEMA shut down that were operating in Kenya. By 2015, and therefore it's not something that is unique to Uhuru. It's something that is alive and has been happening in our country. The first step is to start engaging the state agency. The hardest step is now getting the evidence of what you're talking about, getting people to run the test. Remember, we partnered with so many people during this, especially the media.
Yeah.
I remember one of the media houses tested 100 people for us. They sent their team to the community. They tested 100 people for us so that they get evidence that they would then use to air their programs on TV. And therefore, the greatest for us have been our partners, both within government. Remember, even within the state agencies, there are people who are sympathetic to any cause that you bring up. There are people who are also about the environment. So you need to identify those. I know it's frustrating sometimes when you go to these government offices and they dismiss you very dismissively.
Yeah.
We've seen it in the ruling in court. The judge has noted the manner in which they were very dismissive of this whole issue. So it's up to us, activists and Kenyans in general, to keep pushing our causes. There's a lot of pollution going on around the country.
Yeah.
We believe that there's a lot of work still, and the judge has handled that. He has directed NEMA to come up with legislation also.
Phyllis, was the media supportive of you in any way in your struggle?
Oh, media played the greatest role of all, because one of the things that we needed was a win in the public opinion when we were going to court, before we went to court. And all the media houses came together. We saw all the media houses coming together and running the story of Wino continuously.
Yeah.
We were in and out of so many media houses around the country. And actually the media were very brave. Were very, very brave. Even when the Senate committee came to the community, the media was there. They put them to task. They aired the whole story of the Wino. So media has been one of our greatest partners. We would not have won this case without media support.
Phyllis, there are very many wins here. There's the 1.3 billion shillings to the community. There's a community winning against a Goliath. And there are also other wins for humanity. I mean, the kind of resilience that and dedication that you have put to this also ought to be commended. And I think we just want to take this opportunity to speak to you, Phyllis Omido, directly and tell you, congratulations. This was very good. This is very well done. How is your child now?
My child is well now. He's free from lead poisoning. His last tests, he had less than 5 micrograms of lead in his blood.
Right.
So he has managed to shed off the lead. But you remember, lead knocks off IQ points for a child. They struggle with their education. So this is something that both my son and the children who will struggle with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Those that were very bright in class now are struggling because of the exposure to lead. But so far, almost all the children have managed to shed off the lead in their blood.
We wish you all the best, and we wish him and the other children all the best. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Phyllis.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Phyllis.
Thank you. Phyllis Omido is the Executive Director of the Center for Justice, Governance and Environment Action. Took the case to court, was sustained even before court. Took the case up to everybody who ought to have heard this case since 2008. Commendable. Today's Proverb City. Muga, as we come to the top of the hour.
The child of a rat is a rat.
That's a good one. It's a good one. You know, we're talking about very good stories today. People who deserve the
State commendations.
State commendations. Such people. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
All right, let's look at what may have changed on our roads this morning, and not much is what we are seeing on Mombasa Road. Trying to get into the CBD is not too terrible. We saw that it was moving along very smoothly this morning, and it has continued in fine form today. No hold-ups. Even what we see normally around Cabanas is clear today, and normal traffic. It is bumper to bumper in some parts, but I'll open up for you. The Eastern Bypass behaving badly today, with public service vehicles fully packed where they shouldn't be, and they're actually able to bribe the police and get away with it. No, guys, it's not allowed, and that needs to be shown upon and stopped, I'll say. All right, coming off of Figure Road, also getting into the CBD, not much of an issue there either. Fog seems to be lifting right around Kamende, and that is now heading towards Limuru, so there shouldn't be much of a problem there either. We'll keep taking a look around the city and see what it looks like. But around the country, traffic is not posing a problem this Friday morning. Not to forget, Spice FM KE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic.
We also live stream to the world on Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke. Very many stories tugging at your heartstrings this morning, CT, right?
I mean, this, if you're talking about a award that should be given to people without a shadow of a doubt, this lady is on par with the gentleman from Nyandaro that we spoke of. Because this was a David and Goliath story.
It's fighting and fighting and fighting.
And never giving up.
And never giving
Paying
up.
the price for it, going to court, being put in a cell.
And the sad part is that these children are paying the ultimate price.
Man, when 30 children die. You see, you've heard me say on many occasions that some people shouldn't just be charged in court. No. They should be charged with a much, much higher crime.
Yeah. Yep.
Crime against humanity.
Yep.
Yes.
Especially when officers sit down and arrogantly write and say what you're saying is not true.
And yet it's true.
We can defend it. I mean, you have not conducted any tests here to come and say, all right, so from the test that we conducted recently, this is what we are seeing. No. You're just sitting there and arrogantly saying.
You know, that insensitivity is not just in one government agency.
Yeah.
It is shocking as to how many government agencies have the same mindset. But you see, it isn't the government agency. It's the individuals who work in these agencies.
Yes.
The agency doesn't write a
The
letter.
agency is not.
No,
the
it's
agency is
it's inanimate.
It's inanimate.
Yes.
It's the officials who sit there
Yes.
and they just don't do their work.
No, they don't. And yet they write letters and even sign them.
Yeah. You can
We
imagine.
thank them for the evidence. We now know who to go to
You can imagine.
and who to look for.
Ah. Phyllis's son sitting there, and I mean, Phyllis looking at her son, and like she said, it's affecting your IQ. So you've got developmental challenges as you're growing up, and you're going to live with this for the rest of your life, and you can tell what happened.
And then you have to look after this child
Yeah.
all these years.
Yeah.
That's why even when you look at the amount, you realize, okay, it is a milestone. But what do you do? Or how do you compensate the people whose children died?
Cannot.
You can't.
You cannot. The people who lost their
It's
lives.
never
Or
going
the
to-
adults
it
who
will never
died.
be
How do
enough.
you compensate that?
Yeah, you can't. Anyway, let's switch the conversation now to COVID-19. So, the story in page 2 of the Standard this morning is giving the data that we were discussing yesterday on how people are coming with pre-existing conditions and how a third had both hypertension and diabetes. 18% of the people who've died of COVID-19 also had hypertension alone, and 14% had diabetes. 32% had both hypertension and diabetes. And this is emerging now as data as we continue now learning more and more about this virus. This is emerging. We knew that the pre-existing condition was a factor in terms of how it affects people. We still know that 15% of the population are the ones that are presenting with symptoms, 85% asymptomatic, but it's still being spread. Now, the questions keep emerging. I mean, what's happening in our country? We are seeing the rise in the number of deaths. We are seeing now a spike in the number of tests that are turning out positive. That means our percentage of the tests to those that are turning out positive is also increasing. Experts have said time and again, when it gets to the community, expect to see a rise in the numbers. Let's speak to one of those experts that we've had in the studio before. This is Dr. Moses Masika. Dr. Masika is a virologist at the University of Nairobi, and he's on the line here to speak to us. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning, Latiff, and hello, City Muga and Nduh.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Nice to hear from you again.
Sam, here I'm happy to. I was actually listening to your conversation with Phyllis, and I have to say, if I was the president, I would give her the head of state commendation straight away.
Right quick.
She's done a great job, and I hope it begins to make people think before they put economic investments before lives.
Indeed.
It's a sad story, really.
It's a very sad
But
story.
yes, we're talking about COVID-19, but I feel that is a story that needs to be highlighted much more. The lead poisoning story in Changamwe is really sad.
Indeed. So,
Yeah.
Doc, we are seeing the number of cases now rising. So, after immense pressure from economic and politics, the president had
Yes.
to relax some of those measures that had been put in place initially. And
True.
there was warning from experts like yourselves and others that, when you do this, expect to see a rise in the numbers.
Yes.
There are also experts, I don't know whether you're in that group, who have told us that we expect to hit our peak in the months of August and September.
Well, yeah, that was also said before.
That's a laden statement. That's Harry.
I say that because we are yet to see the full unraveling of the effect of reopening. So I think the modeling will respond to the new behaviors or the new habits that Kenyans will pick up and have picked up. So it might change because models are very sensitive to interventions and our habits.
Dr. What informs these predictions that we keep hearing? Like, what is it that must happen or must we know before we can say, like, what informs those who say in September we'll have a spike, in January we'll have a spike? What informs this?
What we do, for example, we take the data that we've been getting, say, for the last several weeks.
Yes.
We look at where we are now, and then you put in the interventions that are going on and looking at how effective they are. So, for example, if you manage to lock down 100%, this is what would happen. If you are locking down at 50%, this is what would happen. If you continue with this kind of bed capacity, this is the kind of death that you get. If you continue with this number of cases per day, this is the number of hospitalizations you're going to have. So you can see it depends on how many infections you're getting, how many people are getting exposed, and out of those, how many you expect to recover or to die, really. Because if we fill all our hospitals, then it means that number will change, because the guys who are getting sick will no longer be able to be saved, so to speak. So it's a very dynamic model, and it is only true if nothing changes. And we know that is not going to happen. Something will change.
Things keep changing,
So
yes.
it involves us, yes. So if we, for example, if we had estimated the numbers with the 50% lockdown, for example, or restriction in movement, and then the restriction in movement goes up, then we know the cases will go down. But if people are moving around much more than it was expected, then we know the cases go up.
Because what we're seeing now is, there's more movement of people around, even within Nairobi. By the time the president was reopening the Nairobi metropolitan region, people within Nairobi, the 4 million people who live within the Nairobi metropolitan, actually let's even go to 5, were moving extensively around within the city.
True, and even outside.
And even, crossing.
Yes.
And even crossing outside. So now with the kind of numbers that we see, and the public perception is that every time now we are in the numbers of 400. Every time the daily announcements are being made is 200 and beyond, 200, 300, 400s. And the number of the dead is also on the increase, on the up and up.
Yes.
How would we explain this with our current situation?
So if you look at the positivity rate, meaning if you are testing 10 people, how many become positive? In April, we were at 2%. So if you test 100 people, 2 would be positive. In May, that went to 3. So 3 out of every 100 were positive. In June, it was about 5. Now it is 9%. So it means out of every 100 people you test, 9 are turning out positive.
Yeah.
So there are two things here. One, it could be that we have become so good at targeting that we are only picking the people at highest risk of getting infected. Coupled with the second reason that we are actually seeing an increase in the number of people being infected, which is true. So because of that, we are expecting that number will rise until such a time that we begin to bend the curve downwards. And the issue is now how fast does that happen? Because previously we managed to keep a very flat curve, and if you look at the number of deaths, you can see they haven't changed much because the numbers that were coming in were manageable. So if the 2% that are dying, or the 2 out of 100 that are dying, hasn't yet changed, or that could change if we overwhelm our hospitals. So maybe Nduh had a question. I should stop there and let us speak.
No, it's all right. I saw, yes, more people being infected. Still, looking at these numbers that were being given, 15% presenting with symptoms, 85% of those numbers are asymptomatic. However, can you just, because I think these numbers going out there is the perception that because an individual is asymptomatic, the chances of them spreading the virus to somebody else is low. Is that a misconception?
Yeah, and actually, I was looking at the situation report that the ministry released yesterday, and they're actually taking that up to 10%. That only 10% had symptoms in the ones that they are diagnosed. So you can see a large chunk really are asymptomatic. Now, even if we do not know, for example, the absolute risk of getting infected by an asymptomatic person, but we know the risk exists. But if you can see the numbers, it tells you that because more people are asymptomatic than asymptomatic, then definitely the number of people getting infected infected many of them could be getting infected by asymptomatic people because we do not know them.
Right.
And if you are not showing symptoms, people are less likely to take care when around you, and even yourself, you're most likely to take care. But the moment you start getting a sore throat or some fever, you become more careful. So I think we may have no figures hard and fast to tell us how much asymptomatic people are infecting others, because it's difficult to measure that. You do not know who is infected if they are asymptomatic until you test them. But we know for sure they are contributing to the infections. And it's for that reason, really, we should assume that everybody is infected. You, Latiff, I, Masika, could be infected, and we don't know it at that point because you haven't tested.
But then there's this question that lingers. How do you communicate this information effectively? Because people are used to having headaches, they're used to having running noses, they're used to having sore throats.
Yes. I think the best message I can say is that assume everyone, including yourself, could be infected. Because we've seen that a lot of people who get tested and turn out positive have no idea that they were positive.
Actually, where I was heading with my question, I was going to ask is, yes, those who are medical practitioners and people who are specialists like yourself have an extremely clear knowledge. But you wouldn't say that your area of expertise is communication, would you?
For sure, I would say it is not.
Okay, so the question I was actually asking is, how well do we engage people who actually have this as the area of specialization, who know how to actually put this message across to the point where it is actually taken in as gospel?
I think the ministry has engaged this kind of people. I'm not very familiar with their complete communication strategy, but I think they have, because I know the task forces they've put in place are quite broad in perspective. But maybe what we need to see is what is the change in strategy that we need to see, because I know saying it like we are doesn't seem to work for many people. So how else do we need to do to say it? And that's where maybe you guys come in and maybe push the message in a more effective way. I don't know what that would be, because other than stating the facts as simply as we can as healthcare workers, we may not have any more tools in our bag beyond that we can use.
Actually, there is a cadre of employee within the health sector called a community health worker.
Yes.
And many of them during the era when HIV and AIDS was at the center stage of all our health discussions, many such people were trained. And South Africa have used this cadre of employee very well in this fight against COVID.
Yes.
So I am saying it's not as though we don't have the human resource, but it is sourcing the resource and how well we source them through training and empowering them, so that one, they communicate to people in areas where they're already accepted and trusted. And then when they pass on the message will be far easier received than by even people like us in the media, because we're essentially strangers.
True. It's true.
So, I mean, if now we're looking, Dr. Masika, if we're looking at the numbers that we are saying then have presented in hospital, I mean, just a story that we saw today is that now, healthcare facilities are worried about, who they're going to be able to accommodate. So, again, if we go back to the numbers, which then are informing this, if 15% of these cases then are those who are presenting with symptoms and are then in most cases presenting themselves to hospital, essentially that is all we're able to accommodate in medical facilities around the country?
I'm not sure I get your question, Nduh, but
so if we're looking at a full number and just 15% are presenting with symptoms, on the other hand, we have hospitals saying that they're actually getting quite a lot. Until now, a hospital like Bagadi is saying that they're not going to take any more until and unless this person has been found to be COVID positive, because they have a problem in terms of who they're able to treat. So now, if we are saying that the infected cases still at that low number are presenting themselves to hospital, so then we have a problem in terms of who are able to treat and who are able to take in as concerns medical facilities. Shouldn't then that inform this messaging that CT is talking about now, when we're asking people to be a little bit more careful?
Yes. So there's a risk there in what you brought out, Nduh, and the fact that we have limited capacity means if we are thinking of 100 infections, we need to know that although 15% of those may have symptoms, many of those will also be mild and moderate.
Mm-hmm.
So we are eventually talking about, out of, say, the ones that have symptoms, we're eventually talking about 10% that will require some intervention in hospital.
Right.
Yeah, so either because they need oxygen or in the worst case scenario, they may need ICU care. So it's not the 15% that will have symptoms that actually require hospitalization. There are those that have mild symptoms that can actually recover without a lot of... Is that a song?
A lot of interventions. I don't know what you're hearing. We're also hearing the same. Let's take a break at 19 minutes after 8. So
maybe I spoke too much.
So you can sort out the music in your head.
I was beginning to doubt my sanity.
Dr. Moses Masika speaking to us on the phone. He is a virologist at the University of Nairobi. We are talking COVID-19 and what COVID-19 is doing. Let's take a break, take a look at the weather, and then the conversation continues.
All right. The sun is peeking out through the clouds in Nairobi. 13 degrees, still mostly cloudy conditions for most parts of today, with highs of 22 and lows of 11. Cloudy conditions in Njeri will be the order of the day, going into rains later with highs of 20 and lows of 11. Taking a look then into Nakuru, where it's cloudy conditions at 13 degrees. It'll be a wet afternoon, however, highs of 21 and lows of 13. Mostly cloudy in Eldoret at 13 degrees, thunderstorms to take the day, highs of 18 and lows of 12. Kisumu at 19 degrees, cloudy conditions through most parts of the day with highs of 25 and lows of 19. Kakamega is cloudy at 17 degrees. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 16 with showers expected later on in the day. Malindi at 23 degrees is mostly sunny for now. Cloudy conditions to follow later with highs of 28 and lows of 23. 24 degrees and partly cloudy in Mombasa. Highs of 27 and lows of 23. In Kampala it's 20 degrees and cloudy conditions. It'll turn into rain later with highs of 22 and lows of 19. Dar es Salaam is mostly sunny at 23, highs of 29 and lows of 20, with Johannesburg at 5 degrees and mostly sunny conditions, highs of 20 and lows of 33 through the day. And finally in Lagos, 24 degrees and clear skies, rain expected later with highs of 28 and lows of 23.
22 minutes after 8, the Situation Room, the conversation continues. We are speaking with Dr. Moses Masika, virologist at the University of Nairobi, looking at COVID-19, trying to understand and unpack what's happening in the country with regards to COVID-19. Dr. is the music gone?
Yes, now it is.
Are you fine now?
Yes, I should be. Sorry for that. I was saying that, as Nduh had intimated, that if there is a big risk that if the numbers increase at a high rate, then so far we've been able to take care of those who need help.
Yep.
But if we keep getting higher numbers, then we may get to a place where we may not have the right care for those who need it. So, for example, if you have 10 people need ICU and you only have 5 beds, what happens is that you try to give care to the other 5, but it will not be as good as what they would have received in ICU. And it is that number that then we may end up losing as more deaths.
Yeah.
I know there have been a lot of efforts to increase that capacity, but if we get a sudden increase, then we may find that capacity is overrun. So that risk is there, that we may end up then swamping our hospitals if we do not keep the curve as controlled as we've managed to do in the past.
There was a bit of a narrative earlier, maybe around April, May,
Yes.
that there's something that's happening with COVID in other parts of the world that's not happening in these parts of the world. That very many people in Africa are not succumbing to COVID. Does this still hold?
I think if you look at the average mortality rates, for the major part, we've seen lower mortality rates in Africa. And I think that's because the numbers were much fewer. If you're taking care of fewer numbers, you are able to, the numbers of the sick, then you're able to give them good or better care. But if we got swamped, like Italy got swamped, and even the US at some point, and many other countries, then we may not necessarily maintain the same numbers. So as it is now, like Kenya is at 2%, meaning 1 out of 50 people with COVID-19 has passed on, as compared to a global average of about 4-5%. So that's about half. But that has been possible because people are actually getting the care that they need. That if we, at the slightest show or sign of distress, you can get oxygen. But now imagine if you need that oxygen and it's not there or it's not enough, then that changes the dynamic. So I think it's mainly because of the availability, or because the numbers have been so low that Africa has managed to help those who need help.
What is the average globally of the symptomatic and asymptomatic cases, and then even for the symptomatic, those that require intensive care?
I think the asymptomatics are difficult to tell because there are many people we haven't tested. So you cannot give a hard and fast figure and say this percentage is asymptomatic. But what we've seen is that out of those who are symptomatic, those that you can show any symptoms, about 80% will have very mild or moderate presentation, meaning they can be basically even sit at home and recover.
Is this true in all parts of the world?
Most parts, on average, if you look at the numbers, there's a little variation, but that's the picture. That 80% will have mild or moderate symptoms, but out of that, the rest of the 20 out of 100, you find about 15 will need either oxygen or some other support, and then another 5% that require ICU because they are severely sick. So this varies, of course, in some cases. Like in our case, the numbers that may need ICU may be lower than other parts, but it also depends on, in the group of people, how many are older, how many have the underlying conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and whatnot. And in Africa, what we've seen is that we are much younger than the rest of the world, but then the underlying conditions like hypertension and diabetes are actually here with us. So there's a double-edged, basically two sides of, one side is rough, the other side is helping us.
Dr. Masika, since you've brought that up now, talking about now these underlying conditions, because again, if we go back to the numbers now, it would say that those now who have, hypertension and diabetes then would have issues with COVID if they actually did get infected. Because we've been asking the question directly now, what is the link then between these underlying conditions and then being found to be COVID positive?
I think the issue with hypertension and diabetes has the effect on how the body copes with this infection. And if somebody has, for example, injured vessels, injured by hypertension already, because that's what hypertension does to your blood vessels. And COVID also affects underlying, the lining of the blood vessels. That could complicate issues. That said, I've not seen any what we would call pathology studies or studies on really the blood vessels or the lungs or the organs of these people who are either succumbing to COVID-19 and have these conditions that really delineate or show us the exact causes. We are just speculating, depending on the information that we have, that it could be because of the existing injury. For example, if you have asthma or another lung condition, and then you get an injury from the virus, you have less capacity to cope. And we know that a condition like hypertension affects your blood vessels, and in effect it affects your heart, and that will in fact affect your lungs. So the ability of the body to cope with the extra injury from the virus is reduced by these underlying conditions, as well as things like diabetes, causing a malfunction of your immune system, either by suppressing it or by causing what we call a balance in the immune system to be lost, because the immune system can be too active, too meaning unnecessarily active, causing damage, or it can be too dull, meaning that it will not protect you. And we know diabetes affects the immune system, and that could be the reason. So other than that, I would say that we do not have hard and fast evidence yet to show the exact link, especially because these studies would require a little more time and also a little more resources to do, because you need to be careful with because of the risk of exposure, really. You need to be careful with them.
Dr. Moses Masika, time for another break. Let's take a look at traffic and then come back and continue this conversation. It's 8:30. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. On the line with us is a virologist, Dr. Moses Masika. We are trying to understand this virus, all right, and the effect it's having on the community, and especially here in Kenya. And if you've got any question that you'd like to ask Dr. Moses Masika, you can call in 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Also, you can post your questions or comments on our social media handles, Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
All right, still having some fog issues around the country. Kinungi this morning, very poor visibility, unfortunately. And now other parts also now heading towards Naivasha, where we saw around Limuru and Kimende there were some issues there with visibility being extremely poor because the fog is very low. So we need to be careful as we're heading out in those different directions. It being Friday, we have quite a number of people getting out of the city. All right, looking at other parts now, though, we didn't have much of an issue around Mombasa Road and Thika Road, so it's looking pretty good. We don't have much traffic today, so that's one thing to be thankful for. If it does change, we'll let us know. We did have a little bit of a hold up on Mombasa Road just between Cabanas and General Motors, but that seems to have cleared up from where we see it. Do let us know if anything does get worse than it is right now, and we'll be able to spread the word so we can keep everybody up and about.
Continuing the conversation with Dr. Moses Masika, and if you've got any question to ask him, Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and also we'll pick your call shortly. Daktari, there are very many people who are walking around the country saying, you know what, this COVID, looking at these symptoms, cough, fever, difficulty in breathing, at some point in the last couple of months, I've had these symptoms. And then they go around saying, you know, I believe I had this thing, and I think I recovered from it. And so now, I have developed immunity. Is it true that once you've gotten COVID-19, let's say you've gone through COVID-19, you've been tested, you're positive, then you've recovered, can you get reinfected?
As I think the jury is still out on that one. I think it's possible to get reinfected, but we do not know when. We do not know how long that we don't know if you get infected, whether you develop what we call protective immunity, or you don't, and how long it lasts. There actually have been a few studies so far that show that this doesn't develop in everybody and may not last more than a few months. So I would say for now, if we look at other coronaviruses, we see is that people develop, some people, not everybody, develop a very short-lived protection, and it doesn't last long, maybe a few months at most. So I would say it may be possible, maybe not in the immediate period after infection, but we still don't have enough data to put our foot down and say this is the situation. So I wouldn't say that we need to celebrate after infection that you cannot be infected. Everybody needs to take care. And in fact, even those who feel that they've been infected, that number is likely to be very low. In countries that have had very high rates of infection, when they did assessment, I think less than 5% of the population, 5 in 100, were actually having any antibodies of sorts. So I would say, even given that feeling of having been sick from a cough or a sore throat or a fever, it could easily have been something else. And so most of our population is still vulnerable. Most of our population is still able to get sick.
Are we likely to see symptoms change? I mean, there's some things that have remained constant in terms of the dry cough and such. Are we likely to see, because again, in other parts of the world where they talk about the change of the genomic structure of COVID-19, are we likely then to see, as a result of this, symptoms being different?
Now, just stemming out of that discussion in mutations of viruses, because viruses are changing all the time, what could happen is that it may become less, should I say virulent, less severe in most people, or it could become more severe, which is unlikely, or it could become easier to spread. So because when a virus is easier to spread, it becomes selected through natural selection. But we also need to look at long-term effects of the viral infection. And that is where I think most currently unknown symptoms might come from, or might derive from, not necessarily from the virus itself mutating, but from the long-term effects. Because we haven't had enough time with this virus to know what it causes in the long term. And we've seen people now reporting clotting and a few other conditions. We are still investigating to see, are they really related or actually caused by this virus? And I think that's where we are likely to see a little more in terms of new or unknown symptoms. The virus itself mutating, what it could cause most likely is a change in the severity and a change in the ability to infect.
So basically what you're saying is that there's that long tail, and now that you've mentioned that, it takes us back to the story that was shared by Richard Quest, the CNN journalist, who says he had tested positive and he announced publicly that I tested positive. Then now, recently, he said, I'm still feeling the effects of COVID-19. I'm still getting some cough, I'm still getting some fatigue, and I'm being told that I'm still suffering the long tail of this virus. What's that?
Yes, and that's what I was just saying now, that we're beginning to understand that there is an effect that comes from having had, especially the severe form of the illness. Is it because of prolonged hospitalization, or is it because of the virus itself? And when we combine information from Quest and from hundreds of other patients, we may be able to see a pattern. And then we can say, for example, the long-term effect of this virus is this. We've seen, for example, one of the viruses that I like is called chikungunya, that in some people, we have prolonged joint pains that can last for months, even a year, sometimes more. And that has been documented. And this can only happen with time and after following up many patients, because not everybody gets this kind of tail, so that the few that get, if they are documented, you begin to see the pattern. And I can't say now what this long-term effects will be, but there's a possibility that that can happen, and we're beginning to see a few reports. So what we need to see now is a systemic documentation of the same, so that we can say for sure this is associated with the virus. Because it could be that when somebody is indoors for a long time, there are other issues that will come up, and this may be associated with the virus, but not caused by it. So we need to show causality before we say this is the virus.
Shed some light as well on this new information also that was coming also, I think, from WHO on the issue of when you're outdoors versus when you're indoors in an enclosed space and poor circulation of air, and the virus been staying in the air a bit longer. What was all that about?
I think it's a story about aerosol transmission, really, to put it bluntly.
Mm-hmm.
And although we do not have hard and fast facts showing that the virus can be transmitted through aerosol, which basically means very small droplets, micro droplets that last hours in the air, we cannot entirely rule it out because, as they say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So we need to keep that at the back of our mind and keep collecting more information so that if we show that it does happen, it may mean reviewing our prevention measures and looking at that possibility. So I would say for now, that is an ongoing discussion. Whether that aerosol, the question is whether that small micro droplet contains viable virus to cause infection, because there is what we call an infectious dose that somebody requires to be infected with something. So, and whether if that aerosolized or that small micro droplet hanging around in the air contains a virus that can actually cause infection, because detecting it on a test, it does not necessarily mean it will cause infection.
Even as we keep getting new information, research-based information about COVID,
yes,
there is still a lot of doubt as to what we refer to as pre-existing conditions. Let me explain what I mean.
Okay.
If I look at what has appeared in the papers, it tells you that, for instance, if you already are hypertensive or you have diabetes, you have a 32% chance of dying. No, okay, I'm being dramatic here. But you have a 32% chance of succumbing to an infection, a COVID infection. Okay? Now, how exactly do we arrive at these figures?
Now, I think that is a misreading of the data. When, for example, they said that the people who had died, that 2% of them had both diabetes and hypertension, that doesn't mean if you take 100 people with diabetes and hypertension and have COVID, that 2% of them will die. It just tells you that out of those who died, this number had diabetes and hypertension. Actually, globally, what we've seen on average is that if 100 people with hypertension get COVID-19, about 6 of them will die, as compared to about 1% of people without any comorbidity. So the 32%, the 32 number is telling you that out of the 100 patients who died, 32 of them had this underlying condition. But it doesn't mean that, I don't know if this is making sense, that if you have 100 people with hypertension and diabetes, it does not mean that out of those 132 will die. Do you get that?
It's making sense, yes.
The reason why I ask is this.
Yes.
Perhaps a further explanation as to how it is that certain diseases contribute to your chances, perhaps, of seeing the end of your life or chances of your infection. I think a further explanation of this perhaps would clarify the situation. Because, for instance, we know that one of the symptoms that people who have COVID will exhibit is they'll have difficulties breathing. Now, some of these diseases that probably are already pre-existing may contribute to this because they already incline your system towards a certain direction.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and sorry I keep interrupting you, CT Muga. I've noticed you like dramatic pauses, and I keep putting in.
This isn't a dramatic pause. I've actually stopped.
So pardon me for that. I would say
when you finish something, you say period.
Okay.
I would say that yes, having these underlying conditions predisposes you. And actually, that is one of the reasons why people with underlying conditions are not qualifying for home-based care, because their situation could change. So what we say is that if you have underlying conditions, you basically need to do two things. One is to take extra care that you do not get infected. That can go in different directions. The second thing is that if you get sick or infected, you need to be in hospital so that in case your condition changes, you can be taken care of. And that is because your lungs, for example, have reduced capacity. Basically, your body has a reduced capacity to deal with the complications of this virus. So you could easily tilt over. And I think that's the key message that people with underlying conditions need to take out. First, be extra careful, as we are telling everyone else. And secondly, if you actually get sick, home-based care may not be the thing for you. It will be best if you're in a hospital, so that if you need a quick intervention, it is there. It is available.
A number of people, from what the government has announced, a number of people who've died of COVID-19 have died at home.
Yes.
What is the explanation for this? Is this that people who are under home-based care who died, or is it that people who fell sick just died and then posthumously it's then discovered that they had COVID-19? That's the one that caused their death.
I think it's a mix of all that. There are people who, even after they get sick, do not want to go to hospital because they're afraid of getting COVID-19. Yet they probably already have it. And there are also people, I think, probably who may be feeling pretty fine and decide to sleep it over, but by morning they're already too seriously sick. And by the time somebody is getting them to hospital, they pass on. I do not have the exact data or information on this particular person. Maybe the ministry would have more information on what exactly happened. But I can see those situations obtaining in where somebody has actually avoided going to hospital because of the fear of COVID-19, and after they pass on, they are tested and found to be positive. But there are also those who could be symptomatic, but not so badly off, and they decide to wait a little longer, and by the time they decide to go to hospital, it's too late. Because when you get a problem breathing, you could actually die pretty fast. Breathing is something that you can imagine if you're choking, how much time you have to take action. Yeah.
So Dr. And I say who do we want to actually test now? Because the conversation has gone, initially it was targeted testing, and then it was, community testing, when now people were being asked to come out to certain areas. Now, having looked at how the virus may have spread from county to county in Kenya, who should the attention be given to right now to then get a footprint of how the virus actually looks like in terms of infection in Kenya?
I think right now, with the widespread community transmission, it's going to be a task to select or to test enough for sure. We will not be able to do that. So what I would say is we keep our targeted testing, in that if you test positive, we trace your contacts thoroughly, track their contacts as well, and test them. And also people at high risk. We've been seeing a lot of testing for truck drivers and other people who may be exposed, like healthcare workers. So this kind of targeted testing helps in testing the most at risk, the groups that are highest at risk, and especially contacts that may have been in touch with you if you are sick, or those that may have been in touch with the non-sick persons. And that way, we will be able to prioritize the limited resources that we have for testing as we try to identify as many people as possible. The other group that we need to test are people who come to hospitals with symptoms of respiratory disease. So if they have this sore throat and cough and things like that, we should test them, although we know it's a small number that out of the total number of infected persons, but we should not let it go. So everybody coming to hospital, that screening needs to be done so that testing is also done at that level. But for sure, we will not be able to test as much as we should.
Right.
Time for another quick test, Dr. Quick rest, Dr. so that you can grab some water as we continue the conversation. If you'd like to ask any question to Dr. Moses Masika, pose the question, call 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Let's go back to the port, understand some of these terminologies. So far we've dealt with the bill of lading, the bill of lading.
Lading.
Bill of lading, bill of loading, bill of lading. And then the second one was the
manifest.
The manifest. Now the third
Okay, so now, okay, so we looked at cargo manifest and then we looked at the delivery order. So now let's look at the certificate of conformity. From that, you kind of guess what that should be, right? It's a certificate that confirms that the goods being shipped comply with standards issued by the importing country. So you're given this certificate and you're aware that, okay, because on the portal, remember, we give you the steps that are given in terms of what normally happens during an importing or exporting process. And one of the documents is a certificate of conformity, which you must possess at one point or another. Okay, something else that they call a pickup order is that KPA is an electronic document which has details of import cargo that is submitted by your agent, and it is to facilitate the payment of port charges and subsequent delivery from the port. So that pickup order has all of that information and it gets you going. And then finally, for now, is the pre-advice, which is an electronic document also from KPA. It has the details of the export cargo. Remember, the pickup order has information of the import cargo. The pre-advice has information of the export cargo,
Okay.
which facilitates, it does the exact same thing as the previous. So pickup order, import, pre-advice, export.
Export. All this information you can find on kpa.co.ke/Captain KARGO. 11 minutes to 9.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
You're listening to Spice FM.
7 minutes to 9. Time for some quick fire questions for Dr. Moses Masika from 0719012600. Dr. Are you ready for the questions?
Sure.
All right. So I think the first one here is from Muranga, and this is Yuri.
Spice up your life.
Yuri is on hold, and he wants to ask a question. So, well, let John deal with him, and then we'll
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
The questions that are coming are very, regarding COVID-19 and what is happening.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice.
And the fight against COVID-19. I think Yuri is back. Yuri, good morning.
Yuri, this is Yuri from Muranga.
Yes, Yuri from Muranga. How are you?
Fine.
Ask your question to Dr. Masika. He can hear you.
I'm asking him what about the herbal thing, because we have not been hearing about the Tanzania case now. Is it working?
So you think the Tanzanians took that herbal medicine and now they're fine? Dr.
Yeah.
I think the Tanzanians were supposed to have gotten it from Madagascar, and there has been no evidence that it works really. So the issue is that if everybody was to come up with something and say it works and we just took it, then a lot of people would get injured. So there is no evidence so far showing any of the herbal medications work.
Right.
That is not to say they don't work, but we have no evidence to show that they work. So maybe we still need to keep gathering that evidence.
John in Nyandarua, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Can I?
Yes.
How are you?
Ask your question to Dr. Masika. He can hear you.
Okay, mine has to do with contact tracing. There was the second victim from Nyandarua was collected from near place, and the person who transported him from his home to the hospital with a border is still operating as usual. Now, the question is, if he also became a victim of the same, would he not be transmitting the same to whoever had been fed by the time?
All right. So basically, you're asking how this contact tracing is being done. Somebody has tested positive, and among the very obvious contacts was the border operator, Dr.
Yes, that is, I think, a genuine concern, that if I test positive today, I should be able to tell or inform the authorities, the public health officers, who else I've been in contact with, including the border rider, if I took some tea somewhere, anyone that I've been in contact with. Unfortunately, that's a process that relies on my goodwill, on my honesty. So if I don't give enough information, some people may fall through the cracks. And so I think we probably could be more thorough with contact tracing. I think we've gotten better with time. And I don't know if the border rider was tested and found negative. I don't know. I don't have information on that particular case. But I think, yes, we need to make sure our contact tracing is as thorough as we can make it.
Thank you, Dr. As we're coming to the end of the show, Doc, you are a virologist. You are seeing this virus and its spread. From where you sit, is there a cause for concern? Are you concerned about this specific COVID-19 virus?
I am, and I think everyone now is concerned about it, because we've seen the effects don't just affect our health, they affect everything else. And for that reason, it's a virus that I think everyone has to be concerned about. My concern is initially people had, I don't know, I don't call it fear, but people had the will to stay safe. I don't know what has happened over the last few weeks that, as you say, we've seen people loosening up and dropping their guard. That is my biggest fear, that yes, because this virus requires us to transmit it to the next person. If everybody maintains that kind of vigilance, then we may be able to deal with it much quicker than so that we limit its effect. But if we don't, then my fear is that it may continue to ravage mankind for quite a while.
Okay. Dr. Moses Masika, thank you very much for speaking to us today. Before we let you go, we want you to hear today's proverb, and even before you come in with today's proverb, there's a comment from Kennedy Orinda on social media. He says, Supergirl Nduh, please ask CT to school me on the criteria he uses to extract his proverbs, man. He really cracks me up. So you have
Okay, the man is crediting me with his good sense of humor. Today's it's not a proverb, it's a saying and a fairly simple one. The child of a rat is a rat. I think you get the gist of it, Dr. Don't you?
Yes, I'm trying to imagine it the same as mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka.
Bas, umeipata kabisa?
Okay. All right.
Meaning what?
I'll share you with some of my proverbs with you later.
We look forward to that. Thank you very much, Dr. Moses Masika. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you too for having me. Good day.
Good day. So, answered Kennedy's question. How do you extract these proverbs?
Well, it's actually quite simple.
It's quite simple.
Yes. I Google search proverbs and sayings. As many as I can, and I read the ones which strike me as being interesting.
Okay, Kennedy Orinda, you have your answer. It's quite simple.
If you give me time, I may be able to manufacture some, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Keep it right here. The conversation continues. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Shortly, we'll be speaking with the provost of the All Saints Cathedral, the Reverend Sami Wainaina. This is a man who went out publicly and said, you know what, guys, I've tested positive for COVID-19, and we want to hear his story, plus why he doesn't want the All Saints Cathedral to reopen. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
All right, looking good. In most parts of the city, from what we see, we don't have much of an issue today. Mombasa Road has been behaving very, very well today. Not much traffic getting into the city and out of the city as well. We had some outbound traffic on Thika Road today, and also getting to the CBD by way of the Globe Cinema roundabout. That's not too much of an issue. Looking at other parts of the city, we don't have a problem. Langata Road, Gong Road, and coming out of Westlands is actually looking pretty good as well. For those of you who are getting out of the city today, must remember that the fog is quite low in certain parts, and so that is going to affect visibility. So you want to be careful with that, and of course, be and stay safe. Spice of MKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what it is that you see in case you do see anything affecting traffic this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political,
2 minutes after 9. Good
deep,
morning and welcome to
controversial.
this hour of the Situation Room. What is it that City you want to say?
You actually go to church?
Yeah?
You go to church?
Yes, I do. Why?
That's very good.
You shall know them by their deeds, City.
And in this case, the truth shall set me free. Okay, fine.
We speak like this because now we're joined by a man of the cloth, and this is the Reverend Sami Wainaina, the provost of the All Saints Cathedral. Karibu sana to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
It's good to really have you here. I mean, we have been saying that we'd like to speak to this gentleman when he comes, the day that he comes to the studio. And now we have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
It's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Reverend, let's start from the very top. COVID-19. When you hear that, your story.
I normally say that I'm a COVID-19 survivor. And so coronavirus is real. Well, I have never doubted that it was real, because at the beginning I saw people dying in China and in Europe, and the videos were very scary. I don't think Kenya has experienced that level of infections. However, I didn't know anyone that had COVID, and I've had, even today as I drove here, many Kenyans are saying, do you know somebody who knows somebody? And so I must have said that, well, this thing sounds real, but I haven't seen it until it hit me so hard, and the effect of it. Again, as I was coming here, I spoke to a friend who is in a hospital because of COVID-19. So it's real to me. It's very personal. Yeah.
How did you contract this? How did you get tested? I mean, what happened to you?
First of all, you don't know how you contract it. Well, maybe to some people they may, because if you interact with somebody who is positive, COVID-19 positive, you're likely to say, I did.
Yeah.
But for my case, I was very careful. I think I'm one of the first religious leaders to come out at the beginning to support the government. And in the cathedral, I was able to sensitize my congregation. Please don't greet during the time of peace, sharing. Don't greet, don't hug. I was able to provide sanitizers at the doorways. I did quite a number of things. Even before the government said we are closing churches, I had already decided myself. I consulted with my senior, the Archbishop, and I announced that I'm closing the church. That time I looked irrational, but I had talked to a doctor who is a member of the cathedral and in charge of infectious diseases, and she alerted me quickly, this is where we are headed, and so please take precautions very early. And cathedral being a very busy church, I didn't want the cathedral to be identified as an epitome of infections.
Yeah.
I know later we'll be discussing about the role of the church in fighting the virus, but the church has always played an important role in the society. So I wanted to be that clergy that helps in preserving people's lives. Yeah.
So what was it like? I mean, if we're going to look at the cathedral, like you said, very many services on a Sunday, at least 6 services in the morning, with 7,000 plus congregants in and out during those services. What was it like then to shut down? You know, a church is a religious place, but also a social place. And many people don't just come to worship. They come there because it's a social place. It's a place where families and friends gather. So to say that you're shutting such a place that has been running for over 100 years, you're destroying relationships. You are seen like you don't have faith that you preach. In fact, I was judged that I didn't have proper faith because there's this selective application of the Bible that in the name of Jesus we will, yes, but we're also rational beings. And so for me, I had to balance between the Bible that I know, but also the Bible that teaches me to be a rational and responsible person. And so to shut the cathedral, I was shutting people, relationships, social places where people meet and hang out. And so it is not as simple as shutting a door. Right.
It is actually affecting people directly. Yeah.
Reverend, would you say that those who subscribe to the Christian faith share this view that when you apply faith, for instance, in a matter of healing, you need not seek medical help? And do you think that the balance of it, as you've just presented, is something that is widely held or is widely talked about?
That's a very interesting question. It's quite diverse. because it depends on the foundations of an institution. In the Christian traditions, you have what you would call the Catholics, the evangelicals, where I fall. Then you start going now to Pentecostals, charismatics. So you can see it's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And
I observe you haven't included the smaller groupings that are often referred to as sects.
Maybe they are in between there. And with that kind of spectrum, it becomes very challenging to have a balanced view. But from where I come from as an Anglican, Anglicans are known to be religious, but at the same time, rational people.
Pragmatic.
And the basis of our theology is three. Number one, scripture. Number two, reason. Number three, tradition. Tradition is what has happened in the past. Why did they do things the way they did them? Then the reason definitely is forms our moral theology as human beings, that we are created in the image of God to reason out. But also scripture teaches us. And so that balance is so critical, and unless you theologize properly, you are bound to get into extremes. And in my training, I'm challenged not to ever get to any extreme. In fact, you're taught to be in what you call the via media, at the middle, so that you can be able to judge both extremes. And that is the theology that I would advocate for, and I advocate for those who know me. I'm never extreme. I'm a man of faith. The evangelical faith is a faith that professes believe in Jesus Christ, and they believe in the Bible. And so matters of healing, I know I can pray for somebody and get healed. I have seen that. But God can also choose to heal somebody through other means. He's not limited by my faith.
So then in the cases of COVID, because we've seen this, we have seen those who would then advocate and say, all right, you can be healed from this, so we're going to go ahead. This is now maybe where the reason comes in. We know that God heals, so we're going to go ahead and go to church, and our faith, in essence, has healed us. And then you have those on the other end of the spectrum who are critical of that character and are saying, all right, then, in this case, if it can be, then why isn't God going ahead and healing? Or why aren't these preachers or ministers who normally say that they can heal, why are they now not healing people who are COVID positive?
The whole question of theodicy is the question of how can a holy God allow bad things to happen to good people. And I know that is quite troubling to many people.
Yes.
And that's why a balance is very, very important. Religious leaders, I wish they would know they have so much influence on people that they need to be careful on what they believe, what they say, and what they do. Because when you want to rationalize that if God heals, why can't we have the religious freedom? And that's where the government has the responsibility to shut the churches and say, I know you have the constitutional freedom, but I also have a constitutional mandate to protect you from self-destruction. Because if the government allows then everybody to do everything that they want to do. Remember, COVID-19 or the coronavirus is not personal. When you hear one person has died, it's not one soul that has died. It affects the immediate family members. It affects a community. For example, in my case, when I became positive, it affected my children, my wife, immediately. They became positive. The workers within the homestead, because a family is a household. Then, going out, I'm a public leader, also in cathedral of thousands of people. So you realize if I died, how many people would this have affected.
Yeah.
And as a minister of the gospel, I don't think I only minister to All Saints Cathedral. All Saints is only a platform for me to serve the community. I'm a community leader as well. And so I shouldn't be allowed to personalize COVID-19. Yes, it is personal, but it's also communal. Because the moment you contract it, you're going to share it with so many people,
Yeah.
and it will affect them. And that's why regulating is so critical. And I know there was the discussions about why should we regulate churches, and why shouldn't we? Churches are under the Society Act. And so the societies, just like parties, are regulated.
Yeah.
Why can't churches be regulated? And so this freedom of people can go to church, they can worship, you are curtailing us, that should stop. The civility is so important, even in our own Christian life.
We are going to have an exciting conversation. We can already tell a number of things that are going to emerge here. So should churches reopen or not? What is it that's driving many of the church leaders to think about and to really push for the reopening of churches? What is it that's driving leaders like yourself, the Reverend Wainaina, to say, no, let's not reopen? And then we'll also, of course, venture into what you've just brought up, the regulation of religious organizations. Should they or should they not be regulated? 14 minutes after 9, this is a Situation Room. Sitting with us on the hot seat this morning is Reverend Sami Wainaina. He is the provost of the All Saints Cathedral. The All Saints Cathedral has already come out and said, you know what? Yes, we know that religious organizations, places of worship have been allowed to reopen, but we are not going to reopen. We want to understand exactly why the leadership of this church has decided not to reopen. Let's take a look at the weather. The conversation continues. Good morning.
Alright, let's jump to here now. We're looking at 14 degrees and cloudy conditions. Rain expected later in the day. Highs of 20 and lows of 11. 21 degrees the high in Nakuru, and rain showers expected later with then lows of 13. Taking a look then into Eldoret, it's mostly cloudy at 13 degrees. Highs of 18 and lows of 12. Kisumu will be cloudy. Highs of 29 and highs of 25 and lows of 19. 17 degrees and cloudy conditions in Kakamega. Highs of 22 and lows of 16 with rainy conditions for later. Malindi, cloudy conditions all through today. Highs of 28 and lows of 23. Mombasa, 27 the high and lows of 23 with cloudy conditions through most parts of this Friday. All right, let's take a look into Kampala, where it's 20 degrees and cloudy. Rain expected later with highs of 22 and lows of 19. Dar es Salaam is mostly sunny at 23 degrees. Highs of 29 and lows of 20. We'll take a look into Joburg, where it's warming up ever so slightly now to 5 degrees. Highs of 20 and lows of 3 with sunny conditions for most of the day. 24 degrees and clear skies in Lagos. Highs of 28 and lows of 23 with rain forecasted for the afternoon. All right, we'll take a last look into Paris, where it's cloudy at 18 degrees and highs of 27 and lows of 15. London is partly cloudy at 19, highs of 27 and lows of 14. And wrap things up 2 a.m. Friday morning, New York, 22 degrees and partly cloudy. Rain expected for later with highs of 25 and lows of 21.
In the Situation Room this morning, we have Eric Latiff, C.T. Muga, Nduh Okoh, and Reverend Sami Wainaina, the provost of the All Saints Cathedral. So, provost, you have just said the All Saints Cathedral is not going to be
Indeed.
for the time being.
Spice up your
What is
life.
the reason for that? I mean, look, a committee was set up, comprised of religious leaders, sat down, looked at the lay of the land, listened to the people, looked at what needed to be done, took advice from experts in the Ministry of Health and others, and they said, these are the protocols that we can come up with. Minimum protocols: observe physical distancing, reduce the number of people who are coming to church, reduce the number of hours that you spend in the church. And if we followed this, then we would be safe.
Indeed, I respect the Interfaith Council that sat and considered many, many things. On Tuesday morning, I was in an interfaith committee of the city. And I could hear the reason why they had to take these parameters. And I respect that. But now I need to look at my personal context at All Saints Cathedral. What does that mean? To a church with some 200 people, it's easier to do such a thing because they will have 2 services and distribute people.
They're done.
And they are good. They can go on. If you look at the churches that have already said they are not going to open, these are churches that are mega. They have thousands of people.
Yeah.
And that explains the reason. How do you manage 7,000 people? Which service? Do you log into a service and say, I will come to this particular service? You can see logistically it is not as easy as it would sound.
Not impossible.
And not possible at the same time. So tell me, how do I distribute 7,000? Logistically, it's a nightmare. So what I did was to consult, first of all, with my Archbishop, and he said, don't be in a rush, which was my thought as well. I also consulted with the leadership, and we all felt not yet. So we have set up a task force that is looking, even this morning they had their Zoom meetings, to look at what does it mean to open the church in matters of health, in matters of security, controlling the crowds.
Yep.
What will that mean? And that's why we said, for now, let the task force do its job. Now, the All Saints Cathedral Task Force, just to help us. And that tells you, even if it will take a month for our people to be safe, it's better to be safe than sorry. And again, remember, I'm a COVID survivor. I'm more sensitive. One of the lessons that I learned when I became positive is pastors, senior church leaders should also experience what everybody else experiences. For them to be empathetic, for them to feel what people feel. Because sometimes we have this fallacy that a religious leader is somebody holy who sleeps in heaven, comes in the morning and flies.
It doesn't happen.
That's what I mean. It doesn't happen.
That's not how it works.
Maybe in the next world, but in the world that I'm in,
That's why we were requesting you to come at 9 to give you time. You know.
or to fly all the way down.
Yes.
All right, I drove from home. So we have this thinking that they are special, they can be affected by what affects other people.
Yeah.
That's not true. And that's why I came out personally. I said, no. I was in the ICU when I sent a message to my Christians, the one that went viral, but also the Standard also covered my story. Actually, he called me and I was in the ICU. I said, I'm not able to talk. I'm on oxygen. He said, but just tell me a few things, which I did, and that is fine. And why did I do that? I felt, one, I have a leadership responsibility. Number two, Kenyans don't believe that this can happen. I want them to know. They know me. They trust me. I influence a section of the country. If they would know that Provost has it, they would actually believe it. And so I came out to help people understand that. So having gone through the experience, I wouldn't want anyone, including my enemies, which I don't have.
That whom you imagine you don't have.
I don't have. Remember, I just came from heaven. How would I have enemies here? But I wouldn't want anybody to go through that. And as I said earlier, COVID is not just personal. It affects families
many more people
and
around.
communities. That's why I came out.
What was the reaction from your congregation when you announced we are not going to reopen yet?
Well, the shock. You see, they had not heard of maybe somebody in the cathedral who contracted. And, many people have contracted. Now, after I came from the hospital, many people have reached out to me. My own member saying, Provost, do you know I've been positive? Do you know I'm sick? So after the hospital, what did you drink?
Yeah.
and so as a family, we have become like herbal doctors, telling them how to do concoctions.
Yeah.
And so people have come out. They are able to identify with me. How they get my number, I don't know. And they text me. And today I'm able to reach out easier.
To more people.
Yes. And as I answer your question, there is somebody in my neighborhood whom I knew. And it's like we got sick at the same time. He had pneumonia and I had pneumonia. And he was telling his wife that Provost is actually in the hospital. But that guy was very sick, but he was told the hospitals are full, please stay at home, continue with your medicine. And once the oxygen goes down, and that's why people go to hospital, it's actually the issue of oxygen. Otherwise, COVID, you can be at home and get healed. He collapsed in his house and died. When I came from hospital, still very sick and weak, I called the wife and I said, I can identify with your pain. And I feel so sad that you lost your husband. I wish he was in a hospital. Because even me, I almost collapsed in my house. Fortunately, I had moved into Aga Khan Hospital. And again, when I became very ill in the ward, they took me quickly to the ICU and I got support. So you can imagine how many people can afford such treatment. And later I'll be talking about the government supporting the poor, because not everybody can afford this. So many people got shocked. Is this true? And many people have said, I believed when Provost said so. And so again, leadership.
Yeah.
Leaders needs to come out and speak about COVID-19. The lessons that we picked from HIV and AIDS, we should use them now because it's a pandemic.
Just like that one.
Just like that one. So what happened is we became, we hid ourselves. Nobody wanted to speak.
Yeah.
And the infections
continued.
But when we knew that the best way to fight fear and stigma is to speak, today it's not a big problem to be HIV positive.
So are you advocating for people to self-declare? I test positive today. I tell my neighborhood. I tell everybody that
with a caution. With a caution. To me, not everybody going saying I'm COVID positive. I've gone through a lot of stigma. Maybe later we can talk about stigma. But as a leader, I was strong enough to overcome stigma. Now, back in public, I'm meeting people, and I'm not stigmatized today. But there was one time that I felt so much stigma from my own family. My own family, they didn't know how to treat me after the hospital. Although they were positive, but asymptomatic.
Yeah.
They didn't know. So Dad should be in the bedroom alone. Should we go to the bedroom in masks? Then I would take a small walk in the evening just to gain strength. And my neighbors would greet me from far. Hello, Provost. And if you hear somebody greeting that way, he's telling you, don't come too close.
Yes.
And so I felt the stigma. And Cathedral was stigmatized as a church. In fact, while I was in the hospital, I was able to say, guys, get the Ministry of Health. All of you get tested. You work with me every day. And I suspect you guys are positive. And again, nobody was positive there. And people were able to relax and
deal with it.
Yes, to deal with it.
So
and
you're
so
saying
not everybody
self-declare with caution. What
with
caution?
With caution. But to me, it is the leaders. Leaders influence communities.
Yeah.
Because you as an individual, maybe if you say I'm COVID-19, the stigma you'll go through is not worth it. However, leaders, political leaders, I know your enemies will use that to say you are dying. But if you're strong enough to come out, like I did, I would encourage people to come out.
Come out and do so.
Yeah.
So, still on the same question, when now recently you announced that the All Saints is not yet ready to reopen, are there some people who felt, he's basically just not reopening because he was positive? The rest of us are fine. And we need to worship.
I haven't had that. Number one, it was an official communication. So it wasn't a personal wish. There is the Wainaina me, but there is a provost me.
Yeah.
So I didn't speak like Wainaina, I spoke like the provost as a leader. And when you write such a letter, you don't say I, you say we.
We.
Because we have consulted up and down. It is a we. I'm representing a leadership.
Yeah.
So I haven't had that. In fact, a lot of positive feedback that has come is thank you for taking responsibility. Thank you that you love us this much to care for us.
I want us to take a quick break, take a look at the traffic, what's happening on the roads, on earth, and then we come back and continue talking to the man of God, the Reverend Samuel Wainaina, Provost of the All Saints Cathedral. Very many questions and very many issues to discuss this morning. We have dealt with the stigma, the self-declaration, especially by the leaders. We need to come back and look at churches and the decision to reopen and what they should be considering at this particular time. Good morning. It's 9:30.
All right, it's quite busy along Mombasa Road and further up between Kitengela turnoff, between the Athi River turnoff then and Mlolongo. After that, it seems to be pretty clear all the way past the SGR and then moving down towards General Motors and out then towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. We're feeling out of traffic hour. It shouldn't be too terrible moving on from here now. So not much traffic. Coming on off of Thika Road into the CBD also, it looks good. Traffic didn't cause too much of a headache today. So for that, we are thankful.
Traffic.
Half past 9, it's the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room with us this morning is Reverend Samuel Wainaina, the Provost of the All Saints Cathedral. Also in the room is Eric Latiff, Nduh Okoh, and CT.
Reverend, you mentioned something about regulation. Now, I know this is a thorny issue because from what one reads in the papers, there are some people who claim that they belong to the gathering of Christians who do not feel that the government should have any say whatsoever on what they do. Nonetheless, who do you think should regulate the churches?
I think churches should be regulated. Let's begin there. Why? Why do we register churches? We register churches because they should be under the law. So if an institution is under the law, it means it must be regulated.
So they're subject to
by the same law. But for churches, they should be regulated in two ways. Number one is self-regulation. Just like you and me, you regulate yourself first before the government regulates you. If everybody would claim that they are free to do whatever they want to do, then why should we have traffic rules? Why should we? Why then? Then why is a church special to claim that? Why is a religious institution special to claim such? By now we already know that people have taken advantage of people's ignorance to influence them in a certain way. Here in Kenya, in Uganda, we have had cases all over the world. So if you claim that you cannot be controlled, yet we've seen the effect of abuse of religious freedom, what are you saying?
But Reverend Wainaina, many of these religious leaders say that the boss is not the president, but that the boss is God.
No. Yeah, but we don't live in heaven. We live down here on earth. Your religious freedom affects me. Can you imagine being in a neighborhood where everybody does whatever they want to do? It would be chaotic. I visited a friend somewhere, and he has 7 churches around his home. He told me, I want to sell this facility because everybody wants to do and outdo the other. And so it becomes a society that is chaotic. If you've gone abroad, there are churches within communities. But they regulate their sound. They don't even affect the neighbor. Why would you shout? I know there's a lot of talk about we have freedom to open our lungs and shout the way we want. That is using selective usage of the Bible. And so, back to the question. One, self-regulation would be very important. But where you are not able to self-regulate, the government has a constitutional mandate to say, guys, you must behave this way. In terms of worship, you can worship your style, but take care of sound, take care of this, take care of that.
Those who argue against this bring up very many issues. One, separation between church and state. Two, they talk about when you start seeing the state coming to start regulating us, then you're bringing in other issues. You're affecting faith. For example, the case of Rwanda, where you must have certain training before you are allowed to operate a church or to be a pastor in a church. And they're saying, faith is not about training. Faith is about the relationship with God and what God has ordained in you.
Now, you see, we are not in the ignorance phase. Today, we are educated and we understand things. Africans, we shouldn't argue like that. Before President Kagame closed churches, what was happening? It was getting chaotic. They were becoming kiosks. And even in Kenya, we've had stories of kiosks. And that I'm going to close that kiosk and all that. We've made churches to look like businesses. Already we know that. So why shouldn't they be regulated? Again, you see, I started by being a Christian. Then later I had a calling. And the calling for call to be stabilized, I needed to go through a certain training.
Reverend, you need to explain calling so that people who hear this understand what a calling is.
What happened?
You wake up in the middle of the night and hear a voice. There's a cloud descend. Was
Teleported somewhere.
Or is it a pillar of fire? I mean,
you see, since I was a little boy, I would feel God has called me into serving Him. But I didn't understand what that meant. I wasn't born like that. But as I developed as a human being, I could feel I wanted to become a lawyer. But I could feel, and I know my mom was very disappointed those days that his son, number 8.
Clearly you're many.
She did family planting. She was very disappointed. But you see, when you say you have a call, it should be collaborated by other people. People should be able to see and tell you
that indeed you belong here.
You belong there. And I know many people tried to tell me, but I blocked them and I kept blocking them. Until when it was a revelation, clearly, this is where God had called me.
Okay.
And so it's not just waking up and saying, I have a calling. All of us as Christians are called to be Christians. It's a calling to be a Christian. It's a life of divinity that you're called to as a Christian. But now there's another level of being now a leader of a group of people. And so, sorry, I lost the question.
You were saying calling and training.
Yes, but when you have a calling, you need to go through a certain process so that you understand your calling better. And you also know what particular area of calling am I called to. And so that is an important, and that's what education does. So you move from just a simple call into being a professional, that you can behave in a certain manner of responsibility. Yeah.
Second question, City, out of the 17.
Actually, the questions were tied together.
Okay.
Because there are people who claim and profess that they are Christians, but they do not think that the Bible is what one should use as a point of reference or a manual of operation fully.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Yes, there's a tendency to listen to what their pastor says more than what the Bible states, or there's a greater likelihood by these same people to actually take in what is mentioned or said by their leader as the gospel truth instead of reading or understanding what the Bible says.
Is that not testimony to a leader's, good work?
Remember, as I said earlier, we as Anglicans, we are Christians. However, it's a brand. We believe that the source of our theology is scripture, reason, and tradition. And that is what balances a church. If you only take scripture, scripture is bound to be interpreted. And I can interpret it the way I want for a particular or personal reason.
Yeah.
And that is very, very dangerous. And that's why, even if your church doesn't talk about reason, because you're educated, you can be able to reason out your faith. You can also, the danger we have, especially in Kenya, let me use Kenya, but generally in Africa, is where the pastor reads the Bible for other people. When the Roman Catholic Church was the only church in the world, remember, the theology was with the priest, the father.
Yeah.
And the monks. They are the people who read the Bible and did theology.
Yeah.
When Martin Luther came with the reforms, he said, no, the Bible is a book that should be made available to everyone. That was a paradigm shift in terms of moving theology from the pulpit to the pews. And so what needs to happen here is the pulpit and the pew needs to interact, and that is theology. The interaction process is important. And in Acts of the Apostles, you have people who are called the Bereans. The Bereans, after Paul had taught, they went home, said, this is what Paul said. Is it in the scripture? They confirmed it. And if they needed to challenge, they challenged. You see, in our Christianity today, if you challenge your pastor, you have a demon.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying that the pulpit and the pew needs to interact, where I can be able to challenge the pews and the pews can be able to challenge me. And the moment as a pastor I know that my congregation is not ignorant, they can challenge my theology, I'll be very careful to interpret it the right way. And as a provost, that's what I do. All Saints Cathedral is a church with very educated people and well-to-do. And so I don't just wake up in the morning and go preach. No, I think properly. And I get emails and text messages. What did you mean here? Clarity is important. The moment you see people quoting their pastors more than they quote the Bible,
There's a problem.
it's a cult.
Straight up.
Straight.
Okay. Now, there are very many pastors who, are very good and very strong with how they speak and how they convince their congregation. And very many of them have been accused of spreading this prosperity gospel. They have argued as well that we look at the needs of our people. When the congregants are coming to church, what exactly is their immediate need? When people are coming to the All Saints Cathedral, they have already dealt with the basics. And like you said, the kind of people that come to the All Saints Cathedral, many of them have dealt with the basics.
But I must correct also the impression that everybody is wealthy.
well-to-do. Oh, yes.
I have poor that I feed.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
So, and then there's this pastor who looks at the majority of the people who come to church, and they're coming looking for hope, looking for the future, and they're thinking, I am doing so badly, I've reached the end of my tether. And their argument is, I have to give them hope and show them that prosperity is possible.
And that's why Karl Marx said that religion is the opium of the poor. When people are desperate, they smoke something for them or drink something. Now, if you treat religion like that, then there is no difference between the guy who sells alcohol or bangi or cocaine with you who is selling hope like a capsule.
Right, so you're giving it to people in little doses.
Yeah,
They come every
like
Sunday,
a
you give them a
capsule,
little bit.
and you create dependency that I must be there for me to get my daily or my weekly or monthly dose. And that's where the reasoning is so critical in our faith. Otherwise, if every pastor, pastors are gifted people. And as you said, they have the charisma, they know how to use the right words.
The gift of the gab.
Yes. But that is very, very, very dangerous. Let me give you a quick one. I'll not mention details, but I was in the US and we visited a church, one of these mega churches. And after the service, we wanted to go say hello to the pastor. And our lecturer introduced these PhD students, and the guy started becoming very uncomfortable. And he started saying, you guys are more educated. I hope I made sense in my sermon. And you could tell he's guilty. Yeah. And let me tell you, in the 30 minutes I sat under his preaching, it was a matter of phrases that were repeated that excited the congregation. And the more they got excited, the more he repeated those phrases.
Keywords.
Now, and so if I was asked, I would never go back to that church. Because there's no difference between a movie theater and that particular
Essentially,
church.
you're saying it was an entertainment center.
And that's a lot of what's happening in our society today, even here.
Yeah, and that's why reason is so important, that you can challenge and you can reason out that no, this is not right. The Berean spirit needs to capture us as Africans, especially. Yeah. But this doesn't just affect Africans. I've seen even whites that are drunk of a bad spirit, and some of the things they teach are horrible.
Take a quick break. We want to take a quick commercial break, and as we do that, there's this portal by Kenya Ports Authority that gives you all the information that you need to know about KPA and KPA operations. Today we are looking at jargon. There's a lot of jargon that comes into port operations. We started with the bill of
lading,
and then we went into
you have to say it like that.
The bill of lading.
Yeah.
Okay, and then other documents. So what new document do you want to...
So since today we're focusing on the jargon around documentation, we're going to finish up today with the last two. And the other one was the gate pass. I mean, it sounds pretty self-explanatory. It's the document issued at the exit gate to authorize delivery of cargo from the port. All right, so that's what you get. And
It's
you
a
can
gate
basically
pass.
It's a gate pass.
You get it when you go in,
Yes.
and they'll require to see it when you get
When you're coming out.
Voila. And the final one, interestingly, is called the free pratique.
Spell that one?
Hey, I knew. Pratique. It's practice in French, but it's pratique. This is a certificate issued by the port. Stop looking at me like that, CT. This is a certificate issued by the port health authorities to a ship arriving at the port, indicating that the ship is without infectious diseases or plague on board and therefore permitted to enter the port and to allow people to board and disembark.
Okay.
So it's a certificate of health.
Call it again. There.
Free Pratique. Pratiquue.
Okay.
Free pratik.
Yes.
All right. So it's issued on the ship before it gets to,
Yes.
before it brings disease.
Yes.
Okay.
So, no, it is saying that the vessel
To
is
prevent,
disease-free.
To prevent.
So the next couple of days we'll be looking at the jargon around the ship, and it's going to get pretty interesting because you have things like starboard side indicator and the ship's rudder
You know, we're
and
going
the
far.
tanker.
We haven't even distinguished between berth,
We're coming there, don't worry.
wharf,
We still have some time. But for today, we're
a
finished.
word which is written clearly, quay, but I'm told it's pronounced key.
Key.
Yes.
It's key.
It's key.
Yes.
So we'll look at the jargon surrounding all of this.
Kwe.
Pana baba.
And the other one, a boy.
Okay. Sawa, endelea.
12 minutes to 10 o'clock. It's a situation room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Ten to 10, we have about 10 minutes to hear from Reverend Sami Wainaina, the provost of the All Saints Cathedral. Nduh, what do you want to ask about?
All right, so now,
Classic
Reverend
soul,
Wainaina,
R&B.
you've been able to keep the cathedral closed. There are many churches who want to open because there's the issue that, and it came out immediately when there was a clamor to open churches. There was a quite wide perception that these pastors want churches open because they now don't have an opportunity to collect offerings and tithes from people. And even when we talk about issues to do with regulation, it's that, want and abandon when it comes to the money that you can ask from your congregations. And now, so there's a double question there. Number one, many might point and say, okay, now mega churches, mainstream churches, you can keep closed because there's a structure of payment for you and your staff, so you're fine. But others don't have this, and that's why they want to open. On the other side, when you look at regulation and say, okay, another reason why regulation needs to happen for churches is that, again, the wanton abandon with which pastors unfortunately are able to prey on congregations and demand money from them, that should not be the case.
And that's why I talked about self-regulating. What the mainstream churches have done is to regulate. There are churches that started as one single congregation with a pastor, but as they continue to grow, they started regulating themselves. And those are the churches you call the mainstream. Otherwise, they were not mainstream at the beginning. Maybe at independence, maybe it was the Catholics, the Anglicans, the AICs, and PCA. The missionary societies that turned into churches. But even other Pentecostal churches have come and they are well regulated. But let me also say, I can identify with pastors. I've not been provost all my life. I have served in small congregations without systems.
Yep.
And I can imagine, because they depend on the generosity of
The membership.
the members, sometimes they can be very, very desperate. And my urge to all Christians, if you love your pastors, please take care of them. Let them not be beggars. And again, this is, as you said, it's a double-edged question. Because this is, again, the problem where people start individual or family churches. So when coronavirus comes, it will hit you. Because it's a family business, just like any other business that was opened somewhere.
Look at it this way, Reverend. It's a calling. And with that calling, you decide, I want to spread the gospel of the Lord. And then you bring together a congregation and they start worshiping outside your house. You put up a tent. And then Corona hits. And you had dedicated all your life. Your livelihood basically is on serving this small congregation. And in the end of the week, they come with their support. And that's how they give you their support. Now, you have been told, do not mingle with your congregation. This is where the pain is.
No, I understand fully. Even for me at All Saints Cathedral, to close All Saints, as I said, affected families, but also even finances. I had a budget at the beginning of the year. I have a big construction happening at the cathedral. That meant me slowing down. So it's not that I have a lot of money, but fortunately there were structures that we had put in place that continues to sustain the church. And that's still, even if you're starting a church, put structures in place. What are structures? A leadership structure where you are answerable. You see, for me as the provost, if I misbehave, there is somebody who can ask me.
Yeah.
When you start a church that nobody questions you, nobody questions your finances, nobody knows where you take the money, that's a very dangerous place to be. Actually, you are making yourself precarious. And I'm not saying you should be blamed for that, but surely when you started a church that did not have structures, what did you expect when calamities strike? It will affect you more than a church. You see, if you put a leadership together, you see, like the Anglican Church is quite democratic church where we elect our leaders. They are elected. They are not just appointed. I like your nose, so you should be. Or no. The congregation during the AGM is able to say, we would like the following people to work with the provost and the team in stabilizing the church. And so I'm held accountable. And so that's the basic structure that I'm talking about. It's not the complexity of having 100 churches. No, it's right from where you are. Let the laity have authority. Let them say, our pastor will be paid 100,000, but there will be these deductions that are constitutional, statutory deductions, and what you take home is this. You see, you have regulated yourself. But if I feel like I need money, I just go into and pick money. Problem. You should hold yourself accountable. So remember, you regulate yourself first before you are regulated by others. That's the freedom God has given us.
Over the years, Reverend, these mainstream churches are said to have lost in terms of the number of their following and their congregants. And the people are now moving into the Pentecostals and these new organizations that are coming up. What's the cause of this? Is it that people are losing faith in mainstream, or are you just too rigid?
No, that is true and not true. It actually depends on the institutions. Look at All Saints Cathedral. It's now 103 years old. And I know the way of doings of yesteryears was very different from the way things are done today. What we have done is, at All Saints Cathedral, we have 15 services in one Sunday. And what we have done is to diversify our services to serve our clientele. And that's something that All Saints Cathedral has done maybe for the last 20 years or so, when we saw people saying we are not satisfied. So we said, but why can't we have, if it's a liturgical service that a particular age is attracted to, give them that. But why don't you also give the youth a different brand of Anglicanism? And we have done that. Today, All Saints Cathedral is one of the strongest churches. And so it is true what you're saying. However, where the leadership of the church has diversified their ministry, those churches have become even stronger. But can I also tell you, now there is the reverse. Because of the stability of the mainstream churches, I get so many people coming back. Because, again, now we've become more vibrant, and so they're able to find vibrancy, but also stability in those churches.
Thank you. 1 hour is a very short time to have you. I think we'll ask you to come again.
Out of the 17, I only asked you 2 questions. So there are the 15 more questions that
for another day. Saved for another day. Reverend Samuel Naina, your parting shot. What would you like to tell Kenyans who are listening this morning?
Kenyans, back to the COVID-19. It is real. It affects you as an individual. It affects your family and your communities. And so, take care of yourself, and you'll save your family and community from the effects of COVID-19. The president was under pressure to give us freedom. Please take this freedom with responsibility. Otherwise, freedom without regulation, again, is very dangerous for you. If you have to go to work, wash your hands, keep your distances, get food for your family. However, protect yourself. During the weekend, please, if you have to drink, you can drink water and some milk. If you need a glass of wine or beer, you can have it at home. It is safer to be home than to be outside there. Do your best, and let's trust God for the rest.
Asante sana. Powerful words. C.T. Muga, finish the week with today's proverb.
Should I actually dilute this powerful message with this one? Anyway, every day we have a saying. Some of it, fall into the category of proverb, but this one is just a simple saying. It's a Malagasy saying. The child of a rat is a rat.
Oh. The child of a snake is a snake.
Mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka.
Very, very true.
The Malagasy says mtoto wa panya. Panya. Thank you very much for tuning into the Situation Room today. Join us again Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eric Latiff, Nduh Okoh, and C.T. Muga, and Reverend Samuel Naina, the Provost of the All Saints Cathedral, wishing you a lovely day. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock.